All right, good evening and welcome to the April 12, 2021 Menlo Park Planning Commission. We have attending tonight Commissioner Barnes. I don't know if I saw Commissioner Doran. Is Mr. Doran present?
I'm here.
All right, and Mr. DeCardi.
I am here. Good evening.
Good evening. I see Mr. Kale and
Here.
Ms. Kennedy, and I saw Ms. Tate. I'm your chair, Henry Riggs. So we have all 7 commissioners present tonight. For staff tonight, we have our liaison, Ms. Sandemeyer. We have our coordinator, Mr. Tapia. And is Mr. Parada present tonight also? I think Mr. Parada will be present a bit later.
I'm here, Chair Riggs. Yes.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
Yeah.
All right. So we start the evening with reports and announcements. Ms. Sandemeyer, is there anything to report prior to our public comment session?
Yes, good evening, Chair Riggs and Commissioners. So the City Council will be meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. There's an item on their consent calendar to extend the Planning Commissioner's terms through May 31st and to extend the recruitment to May 7th. There's also an item on the annual attendance reports for all the advisory bodies. And then under info items, there's a report on the formation of the Housing Element Advisory Committee. And that concludes my reports and announcements, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from the commissioners?
Chair Riggs, I have a question.
Mr. DeCardi.
Yeah, to staff, I have to recuse myself from item F1 this evening. How would you like me to handle that? Shall I just turn off my camera, stay on mute until it's over, or do something else?
Yes, if you could just turn off your camera and video, that's fine. And then it's fine to listen.
Terrific. That's what I'll do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I believe we'll have one more recusal later in the evening as well. All right, so we will start the evening with our public comment session. During public comment, you are invited as viewers in the public through our Zoom meeting system here to make comment on anything that is not on our agenda. So we have several items on the agenda listed, but if you would like to make a comment on a separate item, now would be your opportunity. You want to use the Zoom control panel to indicate that you would like to speak. Mr. Tapia, on Zoom, is there also a hand icon?
Good evening, Chair and members of the public. Yeah, so thank you in advance for those who are joining us. This is our first meeting via the Zoom platform. So there may be a bit of a learning curve, but on your screen, if you are an attendee right now, there should be a raise hand feature. If you do select on that, that will notify staff that you do have a comment or question. Otherwise, if you are listening to this meeting via telephone, if you go ahead and press *9, that'll also indicate to staff that there is a raised hand. So either of those options. So if you're watching, click on that raise hand feature. If you're listening, go ahead and click on *9 on your keypad. And Chair Riggs, I am seeing one raised hand right now. With your permission, I would like to go ahead and introduce that speaker.
Please.
Okay, so Cafe Zoe, you should have the ability to now speak.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
welcome.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to let you know that the cafe is working on something, and I want to say thank you to anyone that's listened that's already contributed, but I just wanted to read something and make sure that you guys knew that we were doing this. I decided to phone in tonight to include a lot of the people who knew Catherine Strahl. As you all know, Menlo Park lost a dear friend in Catherine a few months ago. Catherine was a fierce supporter of everything Menlo Park, a lover of the neighborhood known as the Willows, and a truly beautiful soul with her eyes on always what's best, what's good in the world, and what truly matters. In conversation with a number of her friends, including Pam, Denise, Mickey, and Catherine's wonderful husband, Bill Dempsey, I'm asking you tonight to see if you want to help us honor her. The idea is to place a bench in the Willow Oaks Park in honor of her. Many of us had the joy of walking through the Willows with Catherine, stopping in Willow Oaks Park along the way to watch the children play, the dogs wrestle, the joggers go by, and the families just enjoy its beauty. Many of us had the privilege and joy of spending a few minutes or hours talking and taking in all of life in 2020, the good, the not so good, the really bad, and the countdown to 2021 with her. She would marvel at the projects that the commission had worked on in the city as she walked through the Willows. She fiercely loved her time on the Planning Commission, and she never really wanted to not serve. Her illness was the only thing that got in the way. I wanted to just give you guys an opportunity to know that we were doing this fundraiser. We're hoping that we're going to raise enough money to put a beautiful bench in the Willow Oaks Park. We're doing this privately just to not strap the city with any additional expenses. We're almost there, but if we over raise, we will put a beautiful planter next to the bench. As for the aesthetics of the bench, it's been kind of a joke going around. I will admit that I was chuckling at the idea of asking for neon pink, but it was her husband, Bill, that suggested red. The vendor that the city uses has a brilliant fire engine red bench, and we know it would all scream Catherine. She looks so amazing in red. So this bench truly represents the incredible person we are missing dearly. Thank you for considering a donation. They're going through the cafe through our nonprofit partner, Get Human Inc., which has a PayPal link, but feel free to reach out and don't feel like you have to. Someday, I hope we can all maybe have a planning commission meeting sitting out in that bench in Willow Oaks Park. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kathleen, for the record, would you just mention your name? We're supposed to not nudge you to do that.
Oh, my name?
Yes.
Oh, Kathleen Daly.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll just add, when you go on the website, if you want to make a contribution, the website may seem to indicate that it covers multiple charities, but at the moment they are dedicated to the bench. So any money that you want to contribute is specifically targeted, as Ms. Daly has noted.
Thank you, Henry.
Mr. Tapia, do we have any other speakers? Leo, I'm seeing the 3-minute. I'm seeing the 3-minute timer, and I don't see you.
Leo, we cannot hear you. It appears that you're on mute.
Sorry, I apologize. These controls are all over the place. Forgive me in advance. So hopefully now you can hear me. So I will go ahead and introduce Jim Wiley. Just as a reminder, if you could please state your first name, last name, your political jurisdiction, or organizational affiliation. And there is a 3-minute timer. So at this time, Jim Wiley, you should have the ability to now go ahead and speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, could you raise your volume just a little bit?
I'll speak louder because I don't know how to raise the volume easily. I wanted to alert you to 2 technical issues. This doesn't relate to Planning Commission business, but the Zoom meeting link at the head of the meeting agenda does not work. It's missing a digit. Further down the page, the correct link is given. But if anybody tries to sign on with the link that's shown at the top, it will not work. The other thing is that there's a thing to send a comments to the Planning Commission that goes to a web link that is dead. So those are just two technical issues. I live in the Willows. My name is Jim Wiley. That's all.
All right, thank you very much for reporting this in. I'm not sure what we could do at this point to correct that, other than to send out another email with a correction. Vaughn, do you have a suggestion, or maybe I should be asking Corinna?
So the web link for the comment does end at 6 o'clock at night. Any comments submitted after 6 o'clock, that link is dead. Just want to give you a heads up.
All right, well, that is fair. It's a little rough for the commissioners to be trying to read in the 1 hour before a meeting.
Yes, and then we will repost the link after this meeting. So during the meeting, we cannot repost it. Thank you for addressing that to us.
All right, thank you, Vaughn. And Mr. Tapia, any additional hands raised or star nines?
Yes, Chair Riggs, we do have another commenter at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. Forgive me if I mispronounced this. Brielle Jonk. Forgive me again. You should have the ability to speak now. Just as a reminder, please introduce your first name, last name.
My name is Brielle Jonk, and I'm in the Willows, but I'd like to echo Mr. Wiley's comments that I had, excuse me, a lot of difficulty getting into the Zoom meeting because of that lost digit. And so what I'm concerned about is you're going to have a pathetic participation tonight, because I tried over and over and over again to get into the meeting, and it wasn't until I read the entire first page of the agenda that I saw that that digit was missing. If somehow, I don't know how that could be corrected now, but this is the kind of screw up that exacerbates these kinds of Zoom meetings and the participations that we all try and do. I'm looking forward to a time when we can get back to meeting in person in the City Council chamber, because this has been very difficult for us. Thank you, and I will speak later about the Pope Chaucer Street Bridge. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jung. And Mr. Tapia, and do we have a fourth commenter perhaps?
Forgive me. At this time, not seeing any additional commenters.
All right, well, I do hope the link doesn't prove frustrating to speakers on our several public hearing items. All right, with that, I will close the public hearing session and we'll move ahead to our consent calendar. We have two items on our consent calendar. One is approval of the minutes from our March 8th Planning Commission meeting. The second is architectural control applicant William Woodrum for 161 Stone Pine Lane. If any commissioner would like to discuss either item, that would you please signal that you would like to pull the item? Do we have any proposed discussion on either the meeting minutes or on Stone Pine Lane? All right, I think I will pull the item on 161 Stone Pine Lane, at least for an initial discussion. So could we have a motion on item E1, which is approval of the minutes of March 8th?
I'll
Mr.
move
Gale.
we approve the minutes for March 8th.
All right, so I have a motion from Mr. Doran and an indication to move from Mr. Kale. Mr. Kale, may I call you the second?
Yes, I'll second.
All right, any comments? All right, then we can vote by raised hands, starting with Mr. Barnes. Affirmative, Mr. Doran. And Mr. DeCarty. Mr. Kale,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy. Is that a down or sideways? That would be a sideways.
Sideways.
Yes.
I was absent.
Understood. And Ms. Tate. All right, and I will vote in the affirmative. So we have a vote of 6-0-1.
Commissioner Riggs,
Yes, sir.
Lawrence here. I forget, I missed a meeting and I'm having a little bit of a brain freeze as to if it was this meeting. So I need to, Ms. Sandmeyer, do you have any record of attendance? And whether I might have missed this meeting?
Yes, I can double check. It should be in the beginning of the minutes.
Says you were absent, Commissioner Barnes.
I can confirm that.
Okay, so for that reason, if you want, I'm an abstention, obviously. If you want to recall, otherwise I'm an abstention.
All right, I appreciate that. So the vote is then 5-0-2 with 2 abstentions, Mr. Barnes and Ms. Kennedy. So on item E2, this is an architectural control to make exterior modifications, including the enclosure of an existing second floor balcony and partial enclosure of a third floor balcony to an existing single family 3-story townhouse at 161 Stone Pine Lane in the R3 apartment zoning district. We have a letter from a member of the homeowners association making 2 corrections to the we're making a correction to the staff report and making a suggestion. The staff report indicated approval by the homeowners association, and the writer, Mr. Carpenter, indicates that there was no approval because the homeowners association in fact does not claim jurisdiction on architectural control, and they so indicated on their letter. The only comment that we have is the letter from Mr. Carpenter indicating that the enclosure of balconies is not consistent with the original architecture of the development, and that if all the balconies are progressively enclosed, that this will notably alter the appearance of the neighborhood. I just wanted to read that into the record and ask if there are any thoughts from the commissioners.
Chair Riggs.
Mr. Doran.
Yeah, I traded emails with Mr. Carpenter and gave this some thought. I think, I understand his point about the architectural character of the neighborhood as a whole. But I also think that we're kind of, I think we're limited in what we can do about that. These kinds of things are usually dealt with by homeowners associations. And this neighborhood is somewhat unique in that it's relatively old for a townhome development. And at least I think it's not clear that the first California Condominium Act was in place when it was built. So people have freeholds. And the homeowners associations, including Mr. Carpenter, there's 3, and 2 of them have architectural control over changes like this. But I can't confirm or deny that, but it's clear that this homeowners association, I think it's Park Forest 1, doesn't have architectural control. And I think that we're limited in what we can do to address his concerns about the architecture of the neighborhood. I feel that these people have a freehold in their units, and although they may have been built before the Condominium Act, they've had a lot of time to amend their CC&Rs if the neighborhood as a whole wants to have this kind of architectural control. And they haven't done that in almost 60 years. So I think my feeling is that we should approve the application as written.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on the subject? Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. Good evening. I view this as within the right of the homeowner, and importantly, not detrimental to the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. I understand the concern as stated about this being a precedent, but I can't rule to create, I can't make a vote based on the potentiality of a future act. Each project should be looked at individually on its own merits for that specific project. And as it relates to this specific project, and looking at the plans and looking at the aesthetics and looking at what they're intending to accomplish, I don't find it to be detrimental to the neighborhood. Therefore, I don't have reason to, should this come to the vote no on it. So I'm supportive of the modifications as proposed.
Thank you. Any other comments from our panel? Yes, Mr. Kale.
I'll just second what Commissioner Barnes just said and note that we've, I've known several of these projects we've approved in the past where we've enclosed the porch in this development. So I have no problem supporting this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, and I will add, I wanted to withhold my comments, but I'm inclined to feel, as Mr. Doran rather succinctly explained, that this should be an HOA concern, and should the HOA feel that this is a risk and therefore persuade a predominant number of this segment of the community, they could and should revise the HOA in order to give themselves that kind of review. So with that, I'll look for a motion on item E2, architectural control of 161 Stone Pine. Mr. Doran.
I move we approve the application as written.
Thank you. And do we have a second? Mr. DeCardi. All right. Let us take a vote, starting with Mr. Barnes.
And I apologize. Just procedurally speaking, it was pulled, the consent calendar. So we are in fact what? We're voting. Since it's been pulled, are we now voting on their application, or are we voting to what, keep it on the consent calendar and approve it as presented? Is there any nuance in terms of approving something on a consent calendar once it's been pulled versus something in public hearing, I guess is my question.
No, not in my experience. When the consent calendar is voted on as a whole, we are voting on two items. And what we did was separate the two items into E1 and E2, and we've approved E1. And at this point, we would approve or not approve E2.
Okay, so now that it's been pulled, it becomes an item for approval. So in that context, I second it.
I think I have a second from Mr. DeCardi, so we're up for a vote.
Thank you for that. I am a yay. I'm a yes.
All right, thank you. And Mr. DeCarty? Yes, Mr. Doran? And
Yes.
Mr. Kale?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy? Ms. Tate? And I am in approval as well. So we have a 7-0 approval of the pulled item E2. And that concludes section E, consent calendar. We'll move on to our public hearing. Our first item tonight is a use permit request, applicant Chelsea Bright for 2040 Menlo Minalto Avenue. This was continued from our meeting of March 22nd. This is a request for a use permit to demolish an existing one-story single-family residence and accessory building and construct a new two-story single-family residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width and area in the R1U single-family urban residential zoning district. Mr. Paz, do you have any update on this project?
No updates to the staff report at this time. We are available to answer any questions the commissioners may have. I believe the applicant is here as well. Yep, I see Anna.
Welcome, Ms. Bright. Ms. Bright, do you want to make any comment on the project? Not obligated to, but if you would, if you'd like to, this is your chance.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Riggs and commissioners and planning staff. Thank you for working with us on this project. 2040 Minalto, we did discuss on March 22nd. For those who weren't there, we are looking at replacing an existing bungalow home with a two-story modern styled home. We worked with planning to work out all the daylight plane issues that could happen with such a narrow lot. And we are using different roof lines to create different massing and create more interest within the architecture.
All right, thank you.
And I'm here to answer any questions if there's more.
And this is a project of Thomas James Homes, am I correct?
Correct.
All right, do we have any questions from our panel? Mr. Barnes.
Refresh my memory, why did we continue this?
As I recall, we ran out of time.
We didn't have quorum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. No other clarifying questions.
All right, at this point, I'll seek public comment. Once again, those who are watching, you have two options for indicating that you would like to speak on the project. One, if you have dialed in by phone, is to hit *9. This will indicate to staff that you would like to speak. The other is on your screen, the Zoom control panel has a raised hand icon. And if you click on the raised hand, I have one already, that would indicate that you would like to speak on this subject and staff will connect you. We limit our contributions to 3 minutes. And Mr. Tapia, is Ms. Junk our first speaker?
Yes, Chair Riggs. Good evening, members of the commission and members of the public. We do have several speakers in the queue. So at this time, I will go ahead and introduce the first speaker. As a reminder, if you can just please state your first and last name, political jurisdiction or organizational affiliation. You do have 3 minutes. So I will go ahead and introduce Brielle Jonk. You should have the ability now to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm taking this opportunity to speak, and it's not specifically about this project, but it's about this Thomas James Homes company that now has I think at a minimum 12 projects in Menlo Park. And the research I've done from other cities tells me that there are many up and down the peninsula. I think a couple of months ago, I checked with Redwood City and they had 17. So what I'm wondering is if the Planning Commission and could ask the council to have a discussion about what are some of the social impacts that a company of this size really has on the culture and the residential sort of atmosphere of the city. As it stands right now, Tommy James Homes pays top dollar for each one of these homes that they demolish. And what they're doing is they're depriving the stock of what are homes that need to be repaired and could be purchased by young families. And I sometimes I feel like we're used like an ATM. You know, Menlo Park is a wonderful place. And why is that? And it's because residents like me and like my husband and like you people serve on commissions and serve on councils for years. And we create a town that has good parks and schools and libraries and all the amenities. And then we have an out-of-town company that comes in and purchases these homes and invest in them, and then turns around and now they're $3.8 million homes instead of $1.8 million homes. So I would like for there to be some discussion at some point about an impact fee that would pay into the below market rate housing system that we have by these large industrial developers that
You have
come
30
in
seconds.
from out of town. I had 26 seconds, but anyway, I'll stop now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Tapia, would you introduce our next speaker?
Yes, at this time, I will go ahead and introduce Raina. If you can just please state your first and last name, political jurisdiction or organizational affiliation. You do have 3 minutes, so Raina, you should have the ability.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Raina Lehman. I'm the homeowner directly across the street from 710 Stanford Avenue. And I'd just like to confirm that that's the item that you are considering at the moment.
We're looking at 2040 Minalto Avenue.
There was my confusion. I'd like to defer my comments until the proper project.
Of course.
Later in your agenda. So thank you so much. I'll be back.
You're welcome. And Mr. Tapia.
Yes, Chair Riggs. At this time, I'm not seeing any additional comments.
All right, thank you. At this point, we will close the public comment period for 2040 Minalto Avenue and bring it back to our panel for questions and discussion regarding the project. Mr. Kale.
Thank you. I have just one question for the applicant about the roof forms.
Please.
I'm just looking at the shed roofs, the predominant shed roofs, and with this style house, typically those have, I see the dimensions for the eaves and the overhangs and the rakes are 1 foot. I just wanted to ask if they could be extended any further, looking at similar style houses, and the upper end of that are usually a lot deeper than 1 foot. That's my only question.
We would love to extend them. We do have a daylight plane that hinders us from extending them further. So we are actually using a 6-inch eave and rate in order to make sure that we are within those guidelines and those limitations.
I'm looking at the front elevation at the main, I guess you want to call it the main shed roof over the garage. It looks like it's not close to the daylight plane at all.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we can pull that one out.
Okay, that
The
would be
first
my
floor.
only suggestion, is to do that wherever possible to fit the style better.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question, Chair Riggs.
All right, no other questions about the massing or building forms?
No.
All right, any other comments on this project? Mr. Barnes?
Yes, and for clarification, this is comments, when the general comment, you brought it back to the dais, and we're gonna comment and take a vote. That's the section that we're in right now, correct?
Yes.
Sorry, I think I froze up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
There you are.
Sorry about that. I think
So do you have a comment or question?
How am I doing now?
Can't hear you, yes. And that brief freeze there. Mr. Tapia, do you have a suggestion to improve the connectivity at Mr. Barnes' end?
Yeah, one potential option may be to turn off your screen, excuse me, your video. Commissioner Barnes, that may improve with the bandwidth, or just exit the meeting and come back.
All right, so, but we should still have audio?
Yes, if he's able to turn off his video feed, his audio should come in pretty clean.
Andrew, are you able to hear that suggestion? This is a bit reminiscent of early last year.
Chair Riggs, one other option, if Commissioner Barnes can hear me, is he could potentially call in to the meeting using the number on the agenda. That could be an alternative.
Okay. And was that number part of the announcement earlier today? By the way, I did not get a reminder from Zoom, I guess because it's Zoom and they don't have the same system. And I did not actually get a link to sign in tonight. I had to get Von's help. But if there was an email sent out, did it include a phone number option for a panelist?
Yes, if Commissioner Barnes did receive that email from staff. There should be, I'm looking at the email that I received. There should be a phone number at the end as well.
That
for Daniel.
email today or last Friday?
Today.
Okay, so I've texted him those two suggestions. Pending that, is there anyone else who wanted to comment on this this house design for 2040 Minalto Avenue? Ms. Tate, was that a signal?
Sorry, no, that wasn't a signal.
Oh. This is like being at the auction house where you buy a $10,000 painting when you go to scratch your eyebrow.
Or now that it's baseball season, send the batter home.
Right. All right. I do have at least a concern. It appears that in an effort to maximize the second story square footage within the box of this particular plan, to maximize the width, the designer has not left any room for eaves and has, in order to create the space above the entry, has introduced a large block form that seems awkward in juxtaposition with the more gracefully sloped forms that surround it. I have to say that it's hard to see this as a positive in the neighborhood in architectural terms. Normally, I like to let projects express some individuality, but I have said before that at least from this particular computer, I think the bar for modern architecture has to be a bit higher than it does for traditional architecture, because the modern architecture does not get to play off of the vibes of the neighboring buildings. And I fear that this particular massing, and it's primarily that one element. The stubby eaves perhaps could be overlooked as an interpretation, although certainly not one you would normally see in a climate with very strong sun. But I have more than a little bit of hesitation with that form above the entry. So I'll just put that out there as my comment. And in the meantime, Mr. Barnes, are you able to participate on an audio level? I'm not hearing a response. All right, any other comments? Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
So I think, there are, whether the architecture of this interpretation of modern fits to the neighborhood. I'm always challenged by, I personally, I'm always challenged by the statements that are made around, like, this type of modern versus that type of modern. Our neighborhoods are, up until a certain point, I would say, really tended to lend themselves to a particular type of architecture that you could pretty much say, there was a percentage of bungalows, there were a percentage of, other types of modern homes, sort of, or traditional homes in the neighborhood. And slowly there's just been, a spate of building at a rate that I've lived here, I'm rather new to the community, right? I've lived here a decade. And the changes that I've seen have been pretty amazing. But I have to say, when I do hear things about like how modern is modern and this type of modern versus that type of modern, I feel like we start to walk down this path of nostalgia and anachronistic memory. I'm more concerned about the style of home being dictated by what pencils out for the developer when they build certain types of homes in any neighborhood. And so there's probably a handful of designs, and they go into the neighborhoods, and they say, well, which one of our models would fit here? And as one of our commenters said, this developer comes in, that developer comes in, whether it's Levittown or Thomas James Homes, all of the communities are changing, right? So I'm not as concerned about each individual home. What I am concerned about is a trend in a particular offset around who gets priced out. I would love to find a home anywhere in Menlo Park that is closer to 1 million than it is to $2 million, right? So that whole thing is, so that I'm just making a commentary. I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't approve this project.
All right, understood.
Good evening, Commissioner Riggs. I am back. It is Andrew Barnes.
Wonderful, good to hear you. I don't know if you were able to hear the last two comments.
I did, and I apologize. My internet is giving me fits. I heard Commissioner, the back end of Commissioner Kennedy's comments. May I give my comments as well on the project?
Please.
So I like this project. I think that well, when I say like, fact is my personal aesthetic doesn't matter for all that much, because it really shouldn't. Is this project detrimental to the community? Absolutely not. Have they done a nice job in fitting and citing this particular structure on there? Yes. Is it beneficial to the community? Yes. Does it have good sight lines? It obviously meets all the development standards, and it's a well-constructed, appears to be, based on the plans, to be a well-constructed project. So I have absolutely no reservation in supporting this project. And I do have a point of view on the developer and this quantity of projects. And there's no doubt that this particular builder has a quantity of projects. They've got a business model where you bring them a lot and they build what you want on it. They purchase a lot, they build a spec home, they sell it. Whatever the business model is, clearly they're doing building in the city limits. And I have come to appreciate them because there's a ton of them in proximity to where I am, for their ability to do projects on schedule and mitigate the construction impacts to the surrounding areas, because they have a business model which in fact delivers to folks who are either buying them on spec and you're a neighbor and they're building the house next to you, or you've contracted them to build the house for you based on the plans that you give them. The bottom line is, when you see a project going up with Thomas James, they get in and out, and I would dare say, 60% of the time that another builder does, because they have a model that works. And I'm grateful. I mean, I have zero problem with people rebuilding the housing stock in our communities and creating welcoming homes that families can actually live in. On my street, we're historical 1,150 square feet houses, and whether Thomas James comes in or whether Mr. and Mrs. X come in and hire builder Y from across the street, it still gets built at the end of the day. And converting these obsolete houses into new housing stock that families can live and grow in is a welcome addition to our community. I think, you know, and I not only welcome that, I think building this is imperative to what we do so that families can move into our community. So I have zero problem with that. And I think market economics are what they are. I don't think that's the purview of, it couldn't be the purview of us because we have no ability to control that. So specific to the project, those are my comments, and specific to, you know, these folks doing building in our community. I think the changes to our community are welcome. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barnes. If we have no further comments, we can proceed to vote. So Mr. Kale and then Ms. Kennedy.
Just really quickly, I hadn't really looked too closely at your concerns, Commissioner Riggs, but as we are sitting here, I'm looking at the front elevation, the drawing, which is fairly busy with lots of line work, so it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. And the rendering looks nice. I think what really tells the story is the the streetscape elevation on the second sheet, where that mass of that two-story wall really tends to dominate the houses on either side plus itself. So I guess I overlooked this earlier, but I'm glad that you brought it to the attention. And I don't know if that's enough to vote no, probably not, but it is a concern that it does feel sort of out of scale as maybe a workaround to get this to work. So thank you for bringing it up.
All right, and Ms. Kennedy.
I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
So I move that we approve this project.
And do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Doran. All right, if there are no further comments, we can proceed to vote. Well, I'll start with Mr. Barnes. Since we're on audio, may I guess that you are in approval?
I'm a yes, thank you.
All right, and Mr. DeCardi?
Recused, isn't he?
My error, Mr. DeCardi is recused. Mr. Doran?
I'm a yes.
Okay, and Mr. Kale?
Yes.
And Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
And Ms. Tate?
Yes.
All right, and I think just to be consistent with the comments that I've made, which also reflect comments brought to me by other Willows neighbors, I will vote in the negative, knowing that does not affect the approval of the project. So we have approval of the project, 5, 1, and 1, with Mr. DeCardi recused and Chair Riggs opposed. Congratulations, you are approved.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right, that concludes our item F1. Moving on to F2. This is a use permit, applicants Dan and Leah Wilson for 124 Blackburn Avenue. This is a request for a use permit to demolish an existing one-story single-family residence with an attached garage and construct a new two-story single-family residence with an attached garage on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width, depth, and area in the R1U single-family urban residential zoning district. Let me see, is this Ms. Khan?
No, Chair Riggs, it's Ori Paz.
Thank you. Mr. Paz.
Yes, thank you, Chair Riggs. As a brief update from staff, there was additional correspondence provided by the applicant from the neighbors, and that was emailed to the commission earlier today. I believe that was also updated in the materials that went out and were posted on the webpage. There are no additional comments from staff, but we're available to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from our panel? All right, seeing none, would the Wilsons like to make any comment on their project before we go to public comment?
Sure. Just a quick thing to say that we've lived in the Willows on our street in our lot for 9 years, and we are really excited to rebuild our house here and stay and have a bigger house for our growing boys, as we love our community, our particular neighbors, and our spot where we can walk to the Willows Market. Happy to answer questions if they come up.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so with regard to our public comment, this is the time if you would like to comment on 124 Blackburn Avenue application, and you can do so either by looking to the Zoom control panel on your screen and clicking on the hand icon, or if you're attending by phone, by clicking *9. Either one will indicate to staff that you would like to speak tonight. And so, Mr. Tapia, do we have any potential speakers?
Hey, Chair Riggs, forgive me for my language. Let's see, I am seeing a raised hand, but it appears to be coming from one of the panelists. I'm not sure if that may have been a mistake. I mean, I guess at this point I can go ahead and ask him to speak. It's Carl Hesse.
Yeah, can I speak?
Yes, as a member of the public or in support as a member of the project team?
I was going to speak as a member of the project team, but
Sure. I probably should have asked Ms. Wilson if you were available to speak as well. So please go ahead and speak.
yeah, well, I just wanted to make sure you knew I was here, and I'm available to answer questions. Leah already spoke there briefly. And yeah, the staff report, and as well as, or that included our lengthy narrative of the project, explains things pretty thoroughly. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions or describe anything if something's unclear. And I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Tapia, do we have any other hands raised?
So at this time, Chair Riggs, I am not seeing any comments from the public, but we can give it a minute or two if you would like.
Yeah, maybe just 10 seconds or so.
Okay.
All right, so in order to move the meeting along, I think we'll close public comment and bring it back up to the DS for questions or comments. Mr. Kale.
Thank you. I just had two comments or two questions for the applicant. And I'll note that I'm friends with Carl Hess, but that doesn't create a problem for me. It's a nice design, and I appreciate the ceiling heights, keeping the massing down with 9-foot ceilings and 8-foot ceilings, and the attention to privacy. My only concern is the prominence of the garage. And the first part is the house is set farther back. Is that because of the off-street parking? Is that what's driving the house location?
Mr. Hess.
Can I respond?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so there's kind of a long answer to that question, but the short part of it is yes. You know, the existing house, if you drove by or looked at the drawings, has the garage in the same location, and you know, it was determined after a lot of study and analysis that was really the best spot for it. The lot is non-conforming, and one of the non-conformities is lot depth. You know, we looked at moving the garage back, either attached in back or detached behind the house, but with the short depth of the lot and the utility easement that's back there, a detached garage would have encroached into the building pad area. And between the driveway and that encroachment, it would have chewed into the building pad area so much that it would have made the development opportunities of the property much more constrained. In addition to that, with the garage where it is, and I explain that in the narrative, you know, the property is right at the end of the T intersection with Blackburn and I'm forgetting the name of the street, but you know, so as someone drives straight down towards that T intersection with their headlights on, it shines right at their property, and the garage there in that location helps to buffer that. In our proposed configuration with the garage in the same location, which again is where the existing garage is, meaning there's already a slab in that location. The trees in the vicinity have adapted to that, so we're not going to be disturbing any trees, roots, and by pushing the house further back on the property, keeping the garage in the same location, it does allow us to accommodate the second required parking space as well.
Okay, if that was your short answer, I'd hate to hear your long answer.
I can give a longer one if you want.
So basically the house is the house part is determined by the off-street parking, essentially.
A little bit somewhat by the off-street parking and by the site orientation and its relationship to the street and
okay,
vehicular pattern.
Okay. My other concern, I guess, is the height of the garage. I think given that it's in the flood zone and the eave lines are aligned with the rest of the first floor, that's a tall garage. It's maybe 11 foot or somewhere between 11 and 12 feet inside. So I'm just curious if you had any thoughts about dropping that or looking at the massing of the garage.
We did have thoughts about that, and yes, the plate line does align with the house, and it is a little higher because of meeting FEMA requirements, but also the second floor is built over a portion of the garage, and in our very careful analysis and articulation of that first floor roof line between the two levels, you know, we made a lot of effort to create a nice flowing roof line where, you know, our hips and valleys and ridge of the garage line up with other critical wall lines of the second floor above it. And we felt that that was an important aspect of the design as a whole. And by integrating the trellis structure over the garage door, that helps bring down that perceived height of the garage. Plus, if we had lowered that plate of the garage, the eave on the left side would have interfered with the front entry space, because that would have come in underneath the front porch eave and caused some design complexities there that we also felt were more important to avoid than a slightly taller garage plate.
Thank you. I appreciate the hips and the valleys meeting the second floor. That's hard to do, and it's always a very nice touch. And I completely understand your answers. It still seems like that garage could come down maybe a foot and die into the beam that's over the porch. But I see there's other reasons for that too. So that would be my desire, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this proposal? Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Yeah, so I think the project, I think is really well designed. I think it's super appropriate for the neighborhood. I do appreciate that sort of issue around, you know, a T intersection and the special nature and life experience that gives to you and living in the space. You know, I think it would make a great addition to the neighborhood. And yeah, I'm hoping that we're going to approve this project pretty quickly.
And we just might. Any other comments from our panel? Yes, Mr. DeCardi.
Yeah, I'd agree with Commissioner Kennedy on all levels. And I would move that we approve the project.
All right, so I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Yes, Ms. Kennedy. All right. And I will just say briefly, ditto to Ms. Kennedy as well. And so with that, let us vote. Mr. Barnes is recused, so I'll start out with Mr. DeCardi. That's a yay. And Mr. Doran?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. And Mr. Kale?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Most definitely.
All right, very nice. And Ms. Tate? That's a yes. And you have my vote. So we have all 6 commissioners present in favor and 1 recusal. Your project is approved. Thank you for your addition to the neighborhood. Oh, and by the way, I think the garage height was well addressed with the addition of the trellis. I happen to recognize the first floor plan face as being something very familiar from just around the corner on a project that I worked on. And that was a early 1940s design. So I think that's very consistent with the pattern that we already have in the neighborhood. All right, so moving on or moving back to a similar situation. Item F3 is a use permit applicant Thomas James Homes for 710 Stanford Avenue. This is a request for a use permit to demolish an existing 1-story single-family residence and construct a new 2-story residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width, depth, and area in the R1U single-family urban residential zoning district. And this is Ms. Khan's project.
Yes, it is. Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Any update?
So staff does not have any updates to the staff report, but staff is available to answer your questions. So is the applicant team.
Thank you so much. And do we have any questions regarding 710 Stanford? All right, not seeing any, then I will call for public comment. This is the point at which those attending by Zoom or by telephone can make comment to the commission and our review of 710 Stanford Avenue. If you will look to your Zoom control panel on your screen, that you can click on the hand icon. Or if you're attending by telephone, you can hit *9, and that will also indicate to staff that you would like to speak. We offer 3 minutes for each and every person who would like to speak on the subject, so this would be your opportunity at this time.
So, sorry, Chair. I'm not sure if that was my cue, but I'll.
Please consider it that, and let me know if you see any indication of anyone wanting to speak.
Of course. So we do have one public speaker in the queue, so I will go ahead and introduce him at this time. Just as a reminder, if you can please introduce your first name, last name, and political jurisdiction. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Raina. You should have the ability to speak now.
Got it. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I am on the right agenda item this time. I'm Raina Lehman. I'm the homeowner directly across the street from this project at 705 Stanford. Our comments sent previously are in your packet. I agree with the concerns raised by Ms. Jonk and Commissioner Kennedy regarding developers snapping up homes for profit, maximizing size and amenities, and further reducing the stock of semi-affordable housing in Menlo Park, and also depriving my kids of the opportunity for home ownership in the area. It's sad. 710 is a lovely older home. It needs upgrading, and it definitely needs some TLC. It's on a substandard lot. The proposed project doubles the size of the existing house. I see the staff report indicates compliance with the city development standards. Change is hard. We've lived here for 25 years. We've raised our kids here, and we do not plan on moving out. Reality is life moves forward, and small homes are bulldozed for bigger homes. So with that, we are resigned to, we are somewhat resigned to this project. Might not like it. We request assurances of timely completion of the project and all the mitigations of noise, construction dirt, dust, and other construction activity. And we request some privacy considerations in the landscaping plan that might include some evergreen trees instead of deciduous trees. So thank you for your consideration of our comments.
And could I ask if you're still on the line, if you could clarify, you were hoping for privacy trees at the front of their lot since you are across the street?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Tapia, do we have any other public speaker?
At this time, Chair Riggs, I am not seeing any additional comments.
Okay. Let's go ahead and bring that back to the Planning Commission. Then I'll close public comment and we'll go to commissioners for comment regarding privacy, screening, massing, any of the other issues pertinent to the application 710 Stanford. Mr. Kale, followed by Mr. DeCardi.
Thank you. A couple quick questions for the applicant. Looking at the two of the plans, I see two different streetscapes. One is on sheet D3 and the other one's on sheet D2. I'm concerned about privacy on the left side of the house, overlooking the house downhill. I'm not sure which is the correct streetscape. I've actually driven by and I still can't tell because of all the vegetation around it.
Which sheet are you referring to again? Or did you want me to just express what our proposed plans are for that side?
Real quick, it's the city designated sheets D2 and D3, and it's your sheet A1.0 and the one before that, which is AP-1, I think. There's which of those two, both of those have a streetscape on them, but the left house is different.
Jill, would you like to answer to that? I'm pulling up the sheet right now.
I would certainly like to. I am still looking at what the confusion might be.
And this is Cynthia, if I may. So I'm not sure. So looking at sheet A 1.0, there's a streetscape of the proposed residence, and then 719 Vine Street would be the property on the left, which does have some great difference. It's sitting lower. And then the property on the right is the 700 Stanford Avenue. Is that the streetscape you are referring to?
That's correct. I'm comparing that to the other sheet, which only has a one-story house at 719 Vine Street.
I see that, and I'm not sure I can answer it right away.
It's not critical. I guess my concern only is about the tall windows on the left side of the proposed house, which overlook that property, and if there's any mitigation with plantings or trees to reduce that.
Right. We're keeping the trees, the two trees that are along that side, but we're adding trees to that side as well. Along that side, we're going to be adding, they're called Howard manzanita trees. They're a little bit smaller than the front heritage tree, but they're allowing us to create this vegetation along the whole fence line. So where the other two trees are located, we're filling the void along the rest of the fence line. And then in the front, we're adding in a 48-inch box sour gum tree as well to create privacy for the neighbor across the street, so that they're not looking directly at a two-story home.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think that works. I guess my question is, those windows on the left side at the master bedroom don't necessarily need to be that tall. They could have higher sills as the right side of the house does. Is there, for the staircase in the master bedroom, can those sills be raised to help with the privacy, or what's your thoughts on that?
They can be raised. We'd like to keep as much light in those master or primary bedrooms as possible. The stair window, we also want to be consistent with the stair window, and the stair window is actually, it says 3 feet to the subfloor, but it's actually 8'9" to the landing. So it's a really high window already. And then the primary bedrooms are following that consistency and that window layout. So we can raise them, they'll just be different from the other window.
Okay, I can't quite tell what the privacy concern would be on the neighbor's house. I'm just sort of looking out for them in advance. So I'm not sure if that should be a requirement, but it would be a concern to raise those sills up for me. And my other question is about the window trim. I see it's noted as 3.5 inch painted fiber cement. And I was curious if that is the rustic or the smooth.
We typically have been doing the smooth.
Okay, great, because the rustic just is too rustic, I think. And is there any reason why that can't be wider? There's a lot of shingles there, so it could, I guess it would make sense to me to maybe make that a wider trim rather than the 3.5 inch, maybe a 5.5 inch.
It could be. It could be, yeah, just staying within the hardy typical dimensions, but we could certainly make that a larger trim. You're thinking of doing that just typically?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Those are my only questions, and I wanted to mention to the rest of my commissioners, fellow commissioners, that at the very end of the package, there's a nice rendering that it's easy to miss unless you scroll all the way to the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you for that reference, Mr. Kale, because I think I missed that rendering. Yeah, you could frame that. So I guess I should just check in with Anna when I look at that rendering. And when you look at that rendering, are you comfortable with the upper floor trim width?
Around the windows?
Yes, or are you just as comfortable with the suggested trim width from Mr. Kale?
I mean, I do like our trim width. It's something that we approved to move forward with. We can go wider. It'll give it a slightly different look, but it wouldn't diminish the idea of what we're trying to achieve. So.
Yeah, I guess we did do the on edge trims at the head and the sill. So you do get that additional layering and a little bit of a shadow line that would add on to the 3.5 inch. So.
Yeah, it is a different look. And now that Mr. Kale has called it out, it would be notable. Not that that is necessarily bad, but it would be a departure from tradition for whatever that might be worth. I see you've used a lot of traditional elements in the design, quite a variety of them, from brackets to battens to not quite louvered attic peaks. And I also particularly appreciate that that you offered this rendering, because without seeing it in color, I have to say the mix of materials between the first floor and the second floor were hard to follow or hard to appreciate. And I do think this helps. This helps considerably. And so does any other commissioner have a comment on the project? I actually have, as a result of seeing the on-screen, I have lost my images of the other commissioners, so you'll have to call out any desire to speak. I apologize.
Commissioner Riggs, it is Andrew Barnes. And I am in support of the project. I think it's well done. I think it's appropriate for the neighborhood within development standards. Use materials is fine. Second floor is set back nicely to the front left and right. So I'm in favor of the project, and I'll make a motion. I'm sorry, do we have a motion to approve?
One would be invited. Yes, please.
Sure. And of course, invite other comments from other commissioners. And in the meantime, I will put a motion on the table to approve this project per the staff report.
All right, very good. Any other comments or a second?
So I have both a comment and a second. So I give my comment first.
All right.
That I am in total agreement with Commissioner Barnes. I do think that the project stands on its own merits. I think what we continuously hear, though, from members of the community, as well as members of this commission, is that we have more than just dipped our toe into the future of what housing stock development in this community looks like. And this is it. This is it. So either you come personally with significantly deep pockets, or you're funded by somebody who has deep pockets, or you're a developer. There is, barring some divine intervention, the days of somebody's child being able to purchase a house in the community in which they grew up in without significant support from somebody with deep pockets are gone. But that is aside from what our role is. So I think the house is appropriate. That little area in that neighborhood is really getting redeveloped. I think the development is consistent with what is being built. And so I would second the approval.
All right, thank you for the second. Do we have any other comments before we vote? And please indicate with your voice if you do. Oh, there, we're back. All right, seeing no other comments, I will read through the roll. Mr. Barnes, in approval,
Yes.
yes?
Yes.
And Mr. DeCardi?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mr. Kale.
Yes.
I neglected to note prior to the vote that we have the agreement from the applicant to make at least one change, and that was to the trim, and then a confirmation that the party board will be smooth rather than rusticated. All right, and just verified that. Thank you. And excuse me for interrupting the roll call. Mr. Kale, you said yes?
Yes.
And Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
And Ms. Tate?
Yes.
Thank you, and I am in approval. So we have all commissioners present in approval of 710 Stanford Avenue as presented to staff and as clarified by the applicant. Congratulations on a handsome building. You are approved. Mr. DeCardi.
Yeah, I just have a question about what we voted on.
Right.
I guess I heard the first from Commissioner Barnes as the application as submitted, and the second
Yes,
from
it's as
Ms.
submitted.
Kennedy as submitted.
Yes.
So the
That is
change in the
correct.
trim is just at their discretion. They don't have to do it. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
Thank you.
then the materials were confirmed in the case of the texture to be smooth. And so that's on record. But correct, there was no condition added for the trim width.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our hearing, and thank you, Mr. DeCardi, for that clarification. Our next item F4,
Thank you.
you're welcome, is yet another annual review. This is our development agreement annual review for Facebook, One Hacker Way and One Facebook Way. Shall we say at this point, the early projects. Annual review of the property owner's good faith compliance with the terms of the development the development agreements for their East Campus, West Campus, and Facebook campus expansion project, which would be more than just the first projects. And is this Mr. Parada?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Riggs and members of the Commission. Principal Planner Kyle Parada here. Happy to take any general questions. There are no updates to the staff report. The applicant team is here to provide some comments and overview. They don't have a formal presentation, but some verbal remarks to make. I do want to just kind of make a quick note of clarification. There are 3 development agreements. So I think Chair Riggs mentioned that at the end. There is the East Campus and then the West Campus, which is typically referred to as Building 20, and then the West Campus expansion project, which is 21, 22, and the future hotel. So there are 3 distinct development agreements that the Commission is reviewing tonight for the annual compliance. And as we talked about last year, we did change it to a calendar year instead of the September to October timeframe, which had corresponded more or less to the initial East Campus and West Campus approvals. That concludes my remarks. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this entirely as an option if the Facebook representatives would like to make any comment on this annual review tonight.
Yes, thank you. This is Lauren Sweezy. I'm a sustainability lead at Facebook. Good evening, Chair Riggs and members of the Commission. Well, surprisingly, this is Facebook's 10th anniversary in Menlo Park, so it's quite a landmark here for us, and we are fully committed to maintaining our headquarters in the wonderful city of Menlo Park. You may have read in the news recently that 10% of our employees will be returning to the office in the next month under the safest protocols possible. So that's an exciting moment in, since this has all begun. So as you know, 2020 was a challenging year for everybody, and I want to recognize the ongoing support of the Menlo Park building and planning departments as we've all navigated through these difficult times. We've appreciated all the support during the last year. This evening, I'll provide a brief highlight of our 2020 accomplishments. I'm not going to go over everything, but I did want to highlight a few things. I've also invited several team members to join me to answer questions you may have later. And that includes Christy Louie. She'll be answering any questions on the Dumbarton project. Michael Alba, he's here available to answer questions about transportation. And Juan Salazar is joining us and will answer questions about housing and local hiring. So as part of the campus expansion development agreement, last year we completed our 3rd large Frank Gehry building, what we call MPK 22. And you've probably seen it along Bayfront Expressway. This striking 4-story building includes a light-filled central canyon, tree-studded terraces, a reclaimed Blackwater system, a large solar system on the adjacent garage, and it's now slated to achieve LEED Platinum. So we're very proud of this building and the fact that we were able to complete it during this difficult time during the pandemic this past year. So due to the need to pivot during the pandemic, you can imagine some of our development agreement items had to change up. And so we have several ongoing programs in our East and West campus development agreements that had to go virtual this past year. So I wanted to mention a few of those because it turns out even though they were virtual, they were highly successful. So I'm happy about that. We're proud that we were able to switch up. So the first one I wanted to mention was we're obligated to do a volunteer fair every year. So this went virtual, and we featured 29 organizations over 5 days. And those organizations, the employees were able to get online, interact with the organizations and learn about them. So that was a nice event. We accomplished a virtual job training program with Year Up, and 35 graduates were hired for roles at Facebook. And then Job Train Project Build, which has been going on since 2017. It's a professional training program that we partner with Job Train on, and we fund that. And since 2017, we've had 42 graduates that have been placed in union jobs with an average salary of $24 an hour. And the goal was to provide jobs with a living wage. And as you know, these are new union jobs, and those wages will just increase over time. And we held our 9th Facebook Academy, which is for rising juniors in high school. So that was a development agreement term in our East Campus DA, but we're actually no longer obligated to hold it, but we've been holding it ever since we first started it back in 2013. I think we did a pilot in 2012, actually. So we held our 9th one, and we trained 12 high school students online virtually, and they represented 8 schools from the various local communities around Facebook. And that was conducted over a 6-week period. And I did want to mention too, another one of our obligations is to connect our employees with environmental organizations and offer opportunities to learn about different organizations around the Bay Area, both local and regional. And I'm happy to say that we were able to connect our employees with a variety of opportunities online, and with such organizations as Audubon Society, Save the Bay, Green Foothills. And these were done through posts on our internal platforms, which then connected our employees to opportunities of virtual webinars. And then later on, some of those activities actually were outdoors. Well, again, as I said, it was a difficult year for so many in the local community, and all of our outreach efforts went to supporting their needs, including Wi-Fi for students, food for seniors, meals for essential workers, and groceries for those in need. And I just wanted to highlight a few examples of what we did this past year. We made a huge pivot from holding our Facebook festivals to supporting the local community by donating thousands of food items, thanks to our community events and culinary teams. And we're obligated in our development agreement to support local businesses. And we sponsored 25 local restaurants to provide 10,000 meals to essential workers, seniors, and nonprofit organizations that serve clients in the local communities. And then the Facebook mobile farmers market continued to operate and provide free weekly grocery bags to seniors, clients at organizations like Life Moves, to churches and other local organizations. Although we didn't occupy campus for most of 2020, we continued to meet our development agreement obligations and support the local communities. So the 4 of us are now happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sweezy. I have a question straight up. The farmers market at One Hacker Way has not reopened yet?
No, and actually that transitioned to Facebook festivals. So it started out as a farmers market, and then it turned into a Facebook festival, which had also included a farmers market in it. And no, those have not started back up, and they won't in the short term. I don't know if we will end up doing it later in the summer, but not the first ones in the season.
All right, there hasn't been a lot of community call for it.
Well, it's just we decided it wasn't safe during these times.
I'm just going to check in with Principal Planner Parada, but don't we have our farmers market in activity? I was there the week before last.
Yeah, so I think there are other farmers markets that still operate. I think what I was hearing, and perhaps a representative from Facebook can kind of correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think it's that the farmers market has been coupled over the years with the festival, which would be a pretty substantial, event in terms of the number of people and social distancing. And so I think that might be the safety concern.
Exactly. And well, first of all, we don't have a lot of our employees on campus to run these programs, but also the festivals used to attract 20,000 people, sometimes more.
Oh.
And not, and so that really the highlight was the festival. Less well attended was the farmers market. And so it would just be a difficult situation to handle too many people.
Would it be difficult to have the farmers market again independent for hundreds of people rather than tens of thousands?
That's why we do the mobile farmers market. We do that in the local communities, both the Bellhaven neighborhood of Menlo Park, as well as East Palo Alto. We have 2 stops in East Palo Alto. So we have been, that's continued all the way through. And that's the one that's providing not only the free bags to seniors and some of the organizations and churches, but we have subsidized farm bags for the local community and those in need. And it's been extremely popular.
All right. A pivot, as you say. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Yes, Mr. DeCardi.
Yeah, thank you to the whole team for Facebook for being here and for having this conversation tonight. And thank you for the summary, Ms. Sweezy, and everything you've been doing. It's really great to hear that something that started as part of the development agreement is something that becomes core to your mission in connection to the community, as you described. That's just, I think, terrific to see and a great example of a public and private partnership creating good stuff for the community. Also note, I'm not sure if I need to in this mix, but I will note that I know Mr. Salazar and he and I serve on a board together, although that doesn't change how I am going to ask questions at this particular moment. I just have a couple of questions in this that I'm curious about. And I think, Ms. Sweezy, based on your introduction, this is for Mr. Alba about transportation. I think in reading this through, my understanding is that at the beginning of 2020, you had this early morning period where you did exceed on quite a number of times with the course of normal events as opposed to extraordinary events, the total trip cap. I wondered if that was different from previous years. And given that we then went into the pandemic, that of course is one reason why that would have changed that from keeping on happening. I would love it if you could just explain a little bit more what was happening in that period. If that was in fact a difference from previous years. And then I know from some of the reading that you got the transit hub and some other things opening up, but just describe how that will be mitigated in the future.
Oh, thank you for asking. So yes, Mike Alba with Transportation at Facebook. To your question, I think first part, has this happened in previous years? The early AM period is a key problem for us at that campus, and has been. The number of trips that we've exceeded is extremely low, so it's very much like a very small threshold. And the transit center that we mentioned in the memo to you actually opened up just before we shut down in limited service. But based on our observations, it was making a big impact in that part of the campus. And I think another thing that we're seeing that we had queued up is moving of people around on campus to different buildings that will also alleviate things quite a bit in the future. And other sites around the region as well. Did I address the questions?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Then I would love to follow up with something more prospectively, and given the role that you have in this community, 10 years ago, 10 years, congratulations. And I think in the first several years here, the tripper plan you put in place was seen as exemplary and as groundbreaking for any region. And I know that any number of other companies were struggling to be able to meet the thresholds that you did to get people out of single occupancy vehicles. You know, in the intervening 10 years, you've continued to do more. Others have done more as well and caught up, and a lot of the practices have spread. And as a planning commission, we continue to see these pressures from development in this region, specifically in this region of Menlo Park, and consistently the concern in the community about the vehicle traffic still being one of their major concerns. And so I would love to understand, given this history that you have, given the depth of commitment to the community, what is coming down the road and where are places that you all are looking for that next generation of being able to further reduce single occupancy trip demand by what kinds of mechanisms? And what as a planning commission should we be learning from and taking a look at as this continues to come back to us again and again and again in development in that area of town?
So speaking specifically from the transportation space, the things that we're looking at that I think is of interest in the short term, that's not major infrastructure or any of that sort of thing, would be incentives related platforms and looking at ways to encourage people in a less service oriented and more in a behavioral influencing, which is something that we've just recently started exploring. We don't have any actual firm plans in, but there are some that have been doing this with quite a bit of an effective outcome in influencing below the 50% driving rate, which is a major target that we're trying to achieve, is breaking that 50% threshold aggressively. So I think that's one thing is how do you incentivize people's behavioral change to encourage them to use all of these groundbreaking services that we put in place.
And is that a straight up monetary piece, or are there other things in that as well?
I had a recent debate with somebody about this. I just started using the platform Duolingo for language learning. And one of the things that I found is really effective at encouraging people's behavioral change is just mild competitiveness. So they call it gamification. And so there's, of course, financial incentives, but gamification is sort of a unique area that I think speaks to a lot of upcoming generations that I think will be something we can leverage.
That's helpful. Speaking of taking advantage, I'm going to stop now because my fellow commissioners deserve a chance to be able to ask questions. But thank you for that on the transportation. It continues to be a big, difficult and tricky sore point for us. So we appreciate all you're doing and continue to push on in this space.
I'm going to take the opportunity, Mr. Alba, to follow up on a couple of those items from Mr. Ducardi. One is when you noted that you thought you might have a solution to the trip cap by reallocating staff to other buildings. I can't help but feel that that sounds like we're still going to have the same traffic, but now it won't go through the trip meter. So I'm not sure that that's a solution, except at, you know, at One Hacker Way and at One Facebook Way. And correct me if I'm wrong. And then my other comment was regarding looking at behavior. Is that an indication that you feel that there are enough options out there and now you need more of your staff to be using those options?
So thank you, Chairman. So to your first part of your question, the balancing of population across the campus is distributing trips in a different way. And as you are all very familiar with, traffic congestion is down to quite minute engineering geometry and how much throughput you can have on a certain lane. And so the redistribution around the campus is moving those congestion points and those congestion times to try to balance it more. It doesn't solve for the overall grand regional traffic problem, but for that acute problem at those intersections around Classic Campus that have been shown to be a significant issue.
Well, does it solve, for example, a feeder route such as Willow Road?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly where all of these trips are coming from, but that's the sort of thing that our regional systems are there to try and help mitigate, is to get more people on that. And so to the second part of your question, we do have a lot of services out there. And the behavioral piece is trying to encourage people to make use of those, in particular in the local areas. And you mentioned something that brought a good point up for me, is that with the pandemic and the way people have changed their housing choices, we are looking at how we might redistribute the services that we have out there in order to best make those new housing choices easy for people to continue their commuting. And one thing we've seen is folks moving from cities to other parts of the region. And we're aiming to create this incentive system to try to encourage people to make use of those services as we redistribute them.
Have you looked at Manzanita Works' proposal as a potential additional tool in the drawer? Would that have a positive effect on your trip counts?
We have been working with Manzanita from the very early inception of that several years ago, and we have been tracking it. We had conversations ongoing at the beginning of or end of 2019, beginning of 2020. We did end up helping Manzanita get set up. We haven't worked in any detail on any direct relationships aside from helping them to get set up, I believe, with the general organization.
I was just curious whether they might be useful to you as a smaller, a solution to smaller problems, as opposed to bringing 40 people at a time in from the Mission District and 37 people in from the Marina District, where you could bring in 6 people from Oakland, or maybe 6 from Oakland and 2 from San Leandro and somebody from Fremont on a given route. Just, whether that might be helpful. But I'm sure, given where you are and what you're responsible for, you are keeping an eye on the options. And I'll just note that by asking these follow-up questions, I don't want to fail to note that while we continue to have an entirely unsolved problem of traffic in the immediate region of Facebook, Facebook has been working hard to help the problem. And I think most of us realize that we need to press in multiple directions in order to roll back the situation we got into more than 10 years ago. Anyone else have questions or comments tonight? Mr. Barnes?
Through the chair.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Parada.
I didn't mean to jump in for Commissioner Barnes, but I think these are getting away from clarifying questions and a little more discussion oriented. And I think it would be best to do public comment first, unless Commissioner Barnes has a very specific clarifying question from anything that was presented or in the staff report. But if it's more discussion based, I'd recommend that we move to public comment first.
Thank you, Mr. Parada. I agree. Mr. Barnes, did you have a question?
I do, and in the context of what Mr. Parada said, I will yield for public comment and then come back to me when we're done.
All right, thank you. Again, thank you, Mr. Parada. And at this time, we will move to public comment. So for those who are attending digitally, this is your opportunity to speak to the annual review of the 3 development agreements between Menlo Park and Facebook. And you can do so by using the raised hand icon on your Zoom control panel, or if you happen to be using the telephone by hitting *9 on the keypad. Either one will alert staff that you would like to speak to this subject. And so, Mr. Tapia, do we have a speaker?
Yes, good evening, Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. It looks like we do have a commenter in the queue. It does appear that they appear to be calling in, so unfortunately I don't have their name at this time, but hopefully this individual can hear me. Essentially their phone number, it ends in 3859. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. As just a courtesy reminder, if you can please state your first and last name and your political jurisdiction, that would be great. So you should have the ability to now go ahead and speak.
And you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead. If you're waiting on the phone to speak on this issue, this is your opportunity at this time.
So this should be the caller that's phone number ending in 3859. I did request you to unmute yourself. I believe you should have the option to unmute yourself on your phone. That's possible.
Or just to make sure that one has not hit the mute button on the cell phone, since there are no screen images on the phone call, am I correct?
Right, it's strictly an audio. Okay, looks like they may have activated their microphone.
Hello, do you want to speak to make a test and see if you're live?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. This is Pam Jones.
Hey, Pam, well done.
That was a challenge. I have to call in on my phone because my computer doesn't sound very good. So good evening, commissioners. And I wanted to start with saying that I appreciate the effect of things on the neighborhood of what Facebook has been doing over the years. And I have found that a number of the things actually match the amenities, actually quite a few of them. And I do have a couple of things. One is I'd like to know, which cities that people that are getting jobs and that are trained, where they're coming from to make sure we're reaching our target. I also wanted to thank you for the truck and how convenient it is to order your food and to be able to donate at the same time. And I have to say the quality of the food is excellent, absolutely excellent. A couple other things. I understand that as you slowly are opening up, that there may not be transportation provided. So I do have concern about the possibility of some of the employees renting rooms or homes during the week. It's something that people that commute have often done. I know you don't have control, but I just wanted to bring that up. I do have a question, and that is if I'm reading the development agreement correctly under the West Campus 9.1.6 city services, there's $11,250,000 that goes to the general fund that started in 2018. If my math is correct, that's a total of $33,750,000. And well, I didn't say that quite right, but anyway, I'm sure you gave the money So, I kind of need a yes on that, because then I need to check on the other end, what happens to that money when it gets to the city, and what does it mean for the city to use on services that benefit the community. Again, I want to thank you for all that you are doing, and it is making a difference. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jones. And Mr. Tapia, do we have a additional speaker?
At this time, Chair Riggs, I am not seeing any additional commenters.
I personally would like to thank Ms. Jones for taking the initiative to track what is happening to those fees. I think more than one of us has occasionally wondered, if only for information purposes. So we'll give it a few seconds more to see if anyone else uses the hand icon or phones in with *9. And we'll, with that, I guess, close public comment and come back to the commission for their questions and comments, starting with Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. It is good to be back on video. This is a question related to attachment D, the East Campus Development Agreement, and it's number 19, and it's the one that is transportation demand management information sharing. And I want to touch back into that for a moment. And for instance, the earlier reference to Manzanita Works. So my first question would be, will you be doing information sharing with them in the manner that's called out here, which is sharing transportation demand management best practices with other interested entities? And then what way could you see working with them? I know you had addressed it, but will they be part of this information sharing network that you have? Do you have any plans for that?
Thank you. So as alluded to before, I worked with Mila over the years in coming up with the concept and helping get the Manzanita Works set up initially. We had initiated conversations, and prior to the work from home period, we had initiated conversations with them and their actual formal formation, and offered a donation to help with the formation. We had initiated conversations around what the future of Facebook and Manzanita might look like, but we tabled them during the work from home period, and we haven't picked them up yet. Since we were having those conversations beforehand, I imagine that as we look to returning to service, we would initiate those conversations once again.
And thank you. Development agreement calls out for information sharing. What's Facebook's position about the efficacy of a regional transportation demand management system? How do you see it working? Do you see it playing a role more than just onesie twosies from other parts of the region, but will it have the ability? And I want to make sure I'm limiting this to the DA. I don't want this to, I don't want to litigate transportation writ large, but just because TDM information sharing is in here, I want to use that as kind of an inroad to get some idea on how you see a regional TDM program, TMA, working to solve for what we're, for some of the transportation issues that you see yourself being tasked with.
So the question of how do we see information sharing? We do share quite openly within our professional networks around the things that we learn that are not sort of confidential and proprietary. Things, we can't discuss things like contracts or any of that kind of the business deals and so on, but best practices around how to structure agreements we definitely share in learnings about more effective programs and less effective programs. There's direct to the information sharing, and we did share that kind of information with the Manzanita Works. Prior to Manzanita Works, I think it was called Manzanita Talks. And so during that process, we shared a lot of information around best practices in order to help shape what it ended up becoming. To the second part of your question around the opportunity for TDM at regional scale, there are certainly limitations to what can be done in a collaborative fashion at a regional scale, but there are also things that can't be done without collaborating. For instance, the Manzanita concept initially is this regional function that takes this idea of a TMA, which is normally a very hyper-localized and therefore very limited in what it's able to do, especially in a region like ours where people are moving across such large distances. And the Manzanita Works concept enables collaboration at that larger scale to be able to go across borders, which even many of our transit agencies can't do. And so there is promise in that, in helping to unlock some of that regional transportation. Does that help?
Respectfully, no, but yes. I mean, I'm trying to be plain spoken, but keeping with the confines of, the speaking of the DA, does this thing have the ability, do sub-regional TMAs have the ability to solve for the questions which come up with every project, which is, okay, great, we've got bodies, we need to move bodies, we need to get bodies more efficiently to and from, and cut down how many single occupancy vehicles are on the road. Is this a path for making a material dent in it or not? And that'd be subjective, and Facebook may or may not want to weigh in on that. But to the extent you have an opinion on that, it certainly is helpful as we do our business here. And Facebook is obviously a big landowner, holder, lessee in the community, and understanding your ability to leverage that concept as opposed to pouring concrete and other ways of increasing throughput certainly is a helpful insight. And we don't get that many opportunities. I certainly don't get that many opportunities to ask these questions directly to our good friends at Facebook.
So Facebook does not have an official position for sure on this. As I said, we had started conversations with it. If you want my professional opinion, I do think that TDM as a programmatic solution to mitigating traffic at a regional level is definitely an effective strategy, and an entity that can help to forge relationships across normally separated entities, be that geographic or businesses or cities, should definitely be able to help with implementing TDM at regional scale. I hope that kind of addresses it.
And I was fairly agnostic in my question, whether at the latter part of this question, whether it's Manzanita or whomever, is this something that is potentially have the ability to play a material role for us to be, we certainly give it airtime when we do these discussions, and our discussions tend to be more ethereal than actually does it work and can it really contribute? And I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Mr. Parada, is there anything that, I guess looking to the staff report, that you would suggest that we clarify tonight with this opportunity?
So I don't, that's a great question. So I don't have any suggestions for the staff report, but I do actually want to use this opportunity. I've been waiting patiently to jump in to clarify and respond to Pam Jones's public comment to kind of clarify the payment for that and respond to that. So I want to just start by acknowledging that the total payment is actually 11.25 million. It's actually a little greater than that because the first payment was 2.25 million, and then it has an escalator built in based on the consumer price index every year. So it actually will be greater than 11.25 million, but that is the total amount. And so I realized that the table I created is a little unclear about that, so we'll correct that for the next annual review. So apologies there. In terms of the payment, it's for city services. Typically, the DA actually has language regarding it's for, I have it right here, hang on one second. Spent on services that would benefit the safety of the local community. At one point, it was used for additional police services in the area. I cannot tell you right now what the current budget for the next fiscal year will use the payment for. So I have to look into that and follow up separately.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't have clarifying questions to ask. Any other members? Ms. Tate.
I'm actually interested in Ms. Jones's comments about the encouraging jobs section, and I'm interested to know how many folks actually are from Menlo Park that have been trained or who secured positions with the various opportunities that are laid out there. Job train and Europe was discussed. I'm really interested to know how many people, and also with the hub, how many folks are actually from Belhaven?
Commissioner Tate, this is Juan Salazar, Director of Local Policy and Community Engagement. I appreciate the question. I don't have an exact breakdown. I will say that the programming that we've established is for the immediate community, and the way that we've defined that has really been with an emphasis on the Belhaven community of Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, and North Fair Oaks. So with that, what we've asked folks that we've partnered with to go about sort of doing like skills training, whether it's job train or year up, is for the emphasis for those training opportunities to be within that local community. I think there is sort of moments when they do sort of within their program, they touch other residents from other localities around the Bay Area. But for example, Year Up, the purpose of us actually establishing and having that partnership was that previous to our relationship with them, they used to just have a training site in San Francisco and in San Jose, and it was hard for a lot of local residents in the peninsula to actually attend that programming. So with the partnership that we did establish with them, we housed them on our campus. They were able to provide more training opportunities to like local residents. So I can certainly follow up with a breakdown to be able to provide that for you. As it relates to the hub hasn't opened yet. So there's a physical space in terms of like the Menlo Park hub. We do have a virtual hub that we did launch last year with programming as it relates to like Coursera and so forth. And I think I do want to say that we collected the data around sort of like local, sort of the distinction between who attended those sessions, and I can follow up with you on that information.
Right, I was referring to whatever was listed on the community virtual hub. You're right,
Mm-hmm.
That's what it said. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. DeCardi.
This is actually a question for Mr. Parada. So we are formally going to pass what's in attachment A. Can you explain the first part of attachment A, that we are finding that this report is not a project under CEQA? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so good question. Thank you. So basically, as part of any planning commission action, the planning commission has to either certify or approve some sort of environmental document or find that this is exempt. And so in this case, this is not one of those typical projects that you would need to do an environmental analysis for. If you review the staff report, if you review the staff report, we do talk about the previous environmental reviews for context. They certainly, all these DAs went through an EIR, environmental impact report process, that was certified by the city council. In this case, this is carrying out the obligations of the development agreement set forth between Facebook and the city, and this is not one of those CEQA related projects. So that is the standard finding for an item of this caliber.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Mr. Parada, should we, do we actually need a formal vote in order to find that Facebook is in compliance with the DA?
Yeah, this is the Planning Commission's action, and so it does need a motion and a second if the Planning Commission believes that Facebook has been in good faith compliance with the 3 DAs over the last calendar year.
All right, so at this point, I'd like to suggest that I'd like to open the floor for a motion to make that finding. Mr. Barnes. So moved. All right, and a second?
Second.
And Ms. Tate. All right, anyone want to make comment before we vote? All right, seeing none, I'll start alphabetically, and Mr. Barnes would be a yes.
Yes.
All right, and Mr. DeCardi
Yes.
and Mr. Doran
Yes.
and Mr. Kale
Yes.
and Ms. Kennedy. That's a yes, and Ms. Tate.
Yes.
All right, and I absolutely agree. And so we have a not too unexpected unanimous finding that Facebook is in conformance with the 3 DAs. And with appreciation for your continued support of our community, I believe that closes the item.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming once again to talk with us. That concludes items F, and we move on at this hour, 9:22 p.m. to our study session. This is the applicant joint San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority project. It's a presentation of a planned project to remove and to replace the bridge crossing San Francisco Creek at Hope Street in Menlo Park, connecting with Chaucer Street in Palo Alto. The project also includes related flood protection improvements within the creek from the Hope Chaucer Bridge downstream to Highway 101. And at this point, I think we welcome Mike Sartor. Is that correct?
Good evening, Commissioner Riggs. Thank you for having me and the rest of the commissioners. I am the retired Public Works Director with the City of Palo Alto, having retired in June 2018. And I'm now a retired annuitant, which you can see in the staff report as extra help to the Public Works Department in Menlo Park. And I'm proud to say that I am a 35-year resident of Menlo Park myself. I've been involved with this project since 2002, various phases of the flood protection effort on San Francisco Creek. And tonight I am proud to present Margaret Bruce, who is the Executive Director of the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, of which Menlo Park is a member. So with that, I'll turn it over to Margaret.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I just want to make sure that I'll be running the slides, or will you advance the slides for me?
I
How's this
will
gonna
not,
work?
I don't have that capability. so-
Okay, okay.
Mark,
Well,
connect to a mouse and keyboard.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Vaughn.
Let's see. Let's do that. Okay. Thank you, Chair Riggs and members of the commission. I appreciate your time and attention this evening. My name is Margaret Bruce, and I thank Mike for the very gracious introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. I'll be presenting a quick overview of the Reach 2 upstream project, which includes some channel widening work, as well as the replacement of the Pope Chaucer Bridge. My staff team, including Kevin Murray and Tess Byler, are accompanying me this evening, and as well as our technical arborist consultant, Daria Barar, and hopefully between all of us, we can answer all of your questions. So the reason we are here this evening and embarked upon all of this great work is that the San Francisco Creek has a history of flooding, which is written in its geographical and geological context here in our community, as well as its periodic flood events. The February 3rd, 1998 storm, which some of you may have been residents for and remember personally, resulted in flooding that is known and has been determined to be the flood of record. It's estimated that it represents about a 70-year storm, or a storm that has a 1 in 70 chance of occurring in any given year. Other events in the past have resulted in some bank overtopping, including most recently in February of 2017. So, oops. Too many clicks. Okay, so to put us in geographical context, the San Francisco Creek Flood Protection Comprehensive Plan includes this yellow area here you see in the upper right-hand corner, which is our completed Beta 101 Reach 1 project that opened the channel up from Highway 101 to the mouth of the creek at the bay. The section we're talking about today is this section in pink, this bright magenta line, from the point where it enters culvert under Highway 101 at West Bayshore, all the way up to just upstream of Pope Chaucer Bridge. In the future, we are looking at the feasibility of potentially creating off-stream detention basins for high storm peak flows in the upland upper watershed parts of the San Francisco Creek watershed. Very quickly, this is the floodplain of the San Francisco Creek. These red areas here were removed from the floodplain from the downstream project that you saw highlighted in yellow in that previous slide. These blue areas remain in the 70-year floodplain. I'm showing you here is the 70-year floodplain. These areas will be hopefully addressed by both Reach 2, that's this stretch between Pope Chaucer Bridge and 101, and those upland areas for off-stream detention I showed you in the previous slide. The floodplain for the 100-year flood is very much the same footprint here. It just changes in order of depth. So if we had a 1 in 100-year storm, the water would just be deeper. These are the locations along the creek that are the critical flow capacities. Pope Chaucer is smaller than it needs to be. Middlefield Road Bridge here is the sort of gatekeeper of our channel flow, and all of the points along here need to pass at least that amount of flow. And I want to call attention to a small typo here. That should be greater than 8,000 cubic feet per second. So these are the constriction points, Pope Chaucer and Newell. There are a few other constriction points in here, either natural or human-made, that our channel widening projects are going to open up. Starting at the 101 West Bayshore area, we are looking at aligning the culverts underneath the freeway with the current channel, which is the Sackcrete Wall. There's another bore that goes underneath the freeway. We're looking at aligning the channel wall with the existing bore and opening that space up even more. We are looking right now at how that is going to affect sediment deposition. So when those questions are answered, we'll have a better idea of how to pursue this particular widening opportunity. It's important to note that all of our channel widening work is between 30 and 50% design stage right now. So there are a lot of details being worked out. Working our way upstream now, we're going to look at sites 4, 3, 2, and 1. Sites 4 and 3 along this stretch of the creek have steep saccrete walls on both sides, or in some cases both sides, but on one side or the other of the creek. And we are looking at widening the creek in the places where there is already saccrete or other kinds of construction that has made the channel not its natural configuration in those places, doing our best to leave the other side of the channel as natural as possible. Site 2 has this very large 3-tiered concrete terrace built into the actual channel. And pay attention to this figure right walking in the creek right here. That's Kevin Murray at one of our annual creek walks. That site is going to be taken out. And let me go back a second here and I'll explain, keep in mind that figure there. For channel sites 1, 3, and 4, where the bank will be made more steep and a vertical wall, either a sheet pile wall or a soil nail wall, will be installed to expand channel capacity. The creek bottom and the toe of the channel will be replaced by a treatment that mimics the natural creek function and appearance of the creek channel and bottom to protect the toe of the wall from erosion. Now that site 2 area is going to be laid back in a much shallower slope, mimicking a natural bank, and replanted with native vegetation. This is representative of the expansion of the channel in that area. Again, that large terraced area will be removed and the natural creek bottom and side will be restored, regraded, and planted with native vegetation. And to get it, put it in perspective, that's the same figure you saw in the other picture. This would be to scale. At the University Avenue Bridge, this temporary wooden parapet will be extended from the current bridge parapet in a more permanent way to prevent overtopping in this location. And on to Pope Chaucer Bridge. The top view here is the existing view from the channel looking downstream. The existing Pope Chaucer Bridge is actually a concrete culvert with a flat bottom. Just because it has gravel that you see there, you don't see that the concrete, there's actually a concrete bottom. And the culvert is very long, or making, in other words, making the bridge very wide. It is also a constriction point. Again, it'll only pass approximately 5,800 cubic feet per second. The culvert is undersized for the natural stream flow. This bottom view is the proposed new bridge. It opens up the span across the channel, the creek channel. There are 2 supports for the bridge that are in the creek channel, but they've been designed to be as narrow as possible so as not to interfere with creek flow. There are the new bridge is designed in accordance with state bridge codes for safety and for lighting. The bridge has an open railing design, which provides also for pedestrian, cyclist, and vehicle safety. The lighting fixtures attached to the bridge, although these are artistic renderings, are not exactly the same as being proposed, which will be downlights. So we will avoid any light into the creek channel or onto the water surface and focus the water onto the bridge itself. The bank reinforcements are being evaluated. Bank protection is important near the bridge to protect the bridge from erosion, but we are evaluating other bank treatments, which may incorporate a more natural appearance and more natural materials and protect the native trees along the bank that are there now. Native trees and vegetation will all be part of the replanting scheme as well. It's important that we will be making the channel not just a flat bottom, but restoring the original stream channel shape and function, which is important to many of the environmental agencies that are providing permits for this project. This is a top-down view, an aerial view of the bridge, showing clearly the two bump out sections on each side of the bridge that are designed for pedestrian viewing opportunities and a chance for pedestrians and cyclists to get a view of the creek channel and enjoy the natural beauty of the area. On each side of the bridge, there will be four-way stops, whereas there is only a four-way stop on one side of the bridge at this time. And now going into some of the more technical diagrams. This plan view of the bridge shows the gentle arch of the bridge here in the upper left-hand corner. The bridge deck has a slight height change at about the midpoint of the span. There will be about a 3.5 foot elevation change from the street alignments to the center of the bridge. So there's a gentle arch. The street elevations and the bridge deck do conform. So there's a slight rise, not an abrupt one, but enough of a rise that is part of the reason for the four-way stop, again, to encourage motorists to not drive too quickly over the bridge. Pardon my somewhat crude illustrations here, but I wanted to make sure that members of the commission could see this clearly. This is the outline of the new proposed bridge configuration. This is the outline of the existing bridge configuration. The blue lines representing the creek flow and the arrow representing the direction of flow. So the new bridge is substantially more slender than the existing bridge. This area is the former right-hand turn lane where fill has been placed over that culvert area and the enclosed right-hand turn lane, and trees have been planted in this area. Because the trees that are planted here are in shallow soil over the concrete culvert, and this whole structure has to be removed, we don't anticipate that there is I don't know what I just did here, that there is a way for us to safely transplant most of those trees. We understand that the city of Menlo Park is interested in, may have identified up to 4 trees that are suitable for transplantation. And we are certainly eager to find places for them and to explore the possibility of more trees being transplanted, but for now, that's what we understand. Replacing the Pope Chaucer Bridge is also contingent upon replacement first of the Newell Bridge. And at this time, we understand from the city of Palo Alto that their plans are to replace that bridge in 2023. That's their planned construction schedule. So the soonest we could be doing our construction work would be 2024. In-channel widening projects could happen in 2023 at the same time as the Newell Bridge work, but this bridge, Pope Chaucer, can't be replaced at the same time, only after the Newell Bridge. We know that many residents in the community are concerned about the impacts to trees. At this time, the project is estimated to remove in all of the different widening sites and project work, approximately 160 trees. There will be 64 removed in East Palo Alto, approximately 65 in Palo Alto, and approximately 34 in Menlo Park. We've submitted the heritage tree permit documentation as requested to the city in advance of this meeting. We're looking forward to working with the arborist and with Mike to meet all of the city of Menlo Park's expectations. We understand that some of the community members may be concerned or confused about the difference between the numbers that were, or the sizes of the footprint that were expressed in our environmental impact report, and perhaps members of the commission are curious as well. The environmental impact report showed the maximal extent, the maximum footprint of the project. And as we have continued to refine our engineering and refine the construction footprint, we are continuing to refine and minimize all of the impacts of the project for a number of reasons, not just impacts on trees, although that's important, but minimizing footprint also minimizes our costs, it minimizes impacts to neighbors, and certainly makes our project easier to permit from an environmental regulatory standpoint. So again, the channel widening work is at about a 30 to 50% design stage. The bridge is at about an 80% preliminary stage. And as changes are continuing to be refined, details will change somewhat as well. So these are the locations, the project widening sites and the Pope Chaucer Bridge site where trees will be impacted. Impacts to trees obviously are going to be avoided or minimized wherever feasible. And their replacement is going to be according to a revegetation plan that we will work on collaboratively with the City of Menlo Park and Creekside residents. Traffic is also an important consideration of this project. Truck haul routes will be from University Avenue to 101. These intersections will be the most significantly impacted here in green, and the most significant will be here at Middlefield Road, where a temporary, potentially permanent, but probably a temporary light will be installed to mitigate traffic impacts. Construction noise will be a thing. There's no way to get around that, that these kinds of projects are noisy and they are going to be temporarily intrusive. It's a densely developed urban residential environment and the creek goes right through it. We will do, practice all of the best practices for controlling construction impacts, including vibration and dust and noise and light. But these are the areas where construction noise is likely to occur and have the most impact. So the actions we're taking to minimize not just tree removals, but all of the impacts of the project while we move ahead to protect our community members is minimizing the project footprint, identifying the trees that may be preserved, especially those along the project boundary, working with residents and with staff, working with our arborist. And our results have been preserving specific trees that were sort of on the margin and or were very special because of their age, their beauty, their size. So we are continuing to work on reducing those impacts. And as we continue to refine our engineering designs, those details will continue to be refined and hopefully we can preserve even more trees. And that, let's see, in revegetation plans will be replaced according to species, size, and canopies. And smaller shrubs and ground cover will be focused on California natives. And we'll work with the arborist and with the City of Menlo Park and with Creekside residents using a native plants palette to revegetate the project sites. And I didn't want to race too quickly through all of that, but understanding I'm standing between you and your families this evening, I want to thank Mike Sartor and other members of the Menlo Park staff for their courteous facilitation of this opportunity to present to you all, and I'm glad to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bruce. Very comprehensive and very promising as well. Do we have any questions from the planning commissioners prior to my going to public comment? All right. Yes, is that Ms. Kennedy? Your lighting has changed, so it's hard
No,
to tell.
I know, because I'm simultaneously putting 3 kids to bed. So like walking in and out of bedrooms. So I have to say, Margaret, thank you so much, because that was an incredibly detailed and very effective presentation. And as someone who lives adjacent to San Francisco Creek, but on the other side, in West Menlo Park, anything that we can do to really help that creek do its job, I'm all for it. But I have to say that that presentation was really fabulous, and a really good example of a useful tool for folks to really understand both the scope of the project, existing conditions, and what could potentially happen in the future if we all play nice. So
Well, thank you.
that's all.
All right. And any questions or comments before I go to public comment? Any questions, I should say. All right. Oh, question. Yes, Mr. Kale.
Commissioner Kale, you're muted.
Sorry, I was sneezing earlier. Thanks for the presentation. And I want to just clarify, you mentioned that the lighting will not shine on the water below. What's the reason for that?
There are many environmental reasons why light pollution is discouraged in either aquatic or riparian ecosystems. It simulates the moon, if you will, and creatures that navigate by moonlight are disrupted by artificial light. And so it's sort of wasting light in a way if it's directed toward the stream and not toward the sidewalk or the street. And we wouldn't want to disrupt the natural ecosystems, rhythms, nocturnal rhythms of the creatures we share our environment with.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I'm sure, well, if you could just speak about the lighting for safety then and how that would be handled for the pedestrians and the cars.
So I think that's another reason why the lights will be focused on the street, just to ensure that there is adequate lumens on both ends and across the span of the bridge, so that there's so that it's completely illuminated at the intersections and the crossing, but not onto the water, just onto the bridge.
Okay. And then you mentioned the open railing. Could you talk about the height of that and the materials and how open that would be?
So I think the bridge design, and I think I may want to toggle over to my wonderful colleague, Kevin Murray, who I think is in a attendee on the attendee list. He may have these details top of mind, but my understanding is that code requires that there be no more than a 4-inch opening in any railing to prevent children and other small creatures from falling through or squirming through, wriggling through the bridge deck. Like railings on a deck at a home, it has a similar code requirement. The structure also has to be strong enough to withstand the impact of a moving vehicle. So I don't know if tech support person can unmute Kevin Murray and ask him if he would have any additional comments about.
Yes,
railings.
thank you, whoever unmuted me. I'm Kevin Murray with on Margaret's staff. The minimum height for Caltrans safety standards for car and pedestrian bicycle safety for a bridge like this is 42 inches. So I believe that's where our design is lined up.
What's the material?
I believe it's a combination of steel and concrete.
Okay. And my last question is, on the photo you showed of the existing bridge, there's a gauge to kind of show the height of the water. Will there be something like something similar to that to show people like, the historic levels of the water of the floods in the past, or some sort of historical key like that?
Kevin, can you speak to that?
Yeah, the scale that you see there on the existing bridge is actually used for emergency responders to begin mobilizing when a flood is imminent. We look at the level of water, how quickly it's rising, and it's there primarily because the existing bridge is a threat. When we remove that bridge and replace it, the threat will largely be mitigated, so there won't be necessarily a need for it. But certainly for persons who are curious, we could probably put a scale on one of those pier walls pretty easily. So it's not something we've decided to do, but if it's a suggestion, we could take it into consideration.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Riggs, may I ask a question?
Please.
Thank you. First question is, as it relates to the work that's being done in the creek bed, I live quite close to that, and there is in the neighborhood, it comes up fairly frequently, the concept of wouldn't it be nice to use that creek bed as something more. Our kids, my kid's a little bit younger, but I do know older kids in the neighborhood which do pop over into the creek bed for more getting away and slightly nefarious things that middle agers and high schoolers do. And it's not necessarily a safe place in that, there's some things happen down there, some inhabitants down there, and sometimes it's not a place that you want your kids going to. So, there have been discussions in the past of, what if that was converted into a trail? What if that was more usable? What if kids could go over there and, futz around? And I'm specifically talking to the segment between on Woodland, which starts at, I guess, University Avenue and goes to Middlefield, and that particular segment in there. And I was noticing some of your photos which show the actual water in the creek, and in some of the embankments. And I don't know that we have quite those idyllic experiences of the creek bed. Would it be possible to have those? And will there be any opportunity, is it feasible to have any utilization of the creek bed for anything other than just a creek bed or any recreational purposes?
I understand the appeal of having something like a trail or some closer connection to the creek channel. I think I want to ask Kevin to respond to this, because there are some very specific concerns that our regulatory agencies have about the priority for this creek channel to be an opportunity to maintain it as a very critical migratory channel for endangered steelhead, which come up the creek in winter flows. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
Well, I would just say that years ago, the idea came up of adding a managed trail within the channel. And that comes with certain liability. You have to make sure that the public is noticed when unsafe conditions exist, which can happen quickly. And so it's, the folks at the cities being risk evasive with liability thought that that was something we should probably discuss, but not move forward quickly on. The part about protection of the creek for steelhead and others, there have been instances where people have gone down and shot paintball guns, for example, and had little, just like you said, things that people do to for recreation, but that's actually a violation of the Clean Water Act because this is a protected stream. So we're somewhat limited in the amount of recreation we can actually sponsor. Now that the creek is an open channel and there's nothing wrong with somebody going down there, and if kids want to go down and play, that's perfectly good within their rights to do so. There's nothing illegal about it, or it's not, as long as they're not vandalizing. But we've tended to concentrate our recreational opportunities at the top of the bank to provide either trail features or small pocket parks where we can. And that seems to be a little bit more appropriate and manageable use of the resource to invite people out to enjoy it. And then I would also say that, we've had many requests in the past to do what we can to limit foot access to the channel, because of, in certain areas, it's been used as day camps, homeless encampments, and things like that. And folks have seen some unsavory behavior going on, and they ask us what we can do to help prevent or mitigate that.
And I think it's important also to note that organizations like the Regional Water Quality Control Board and other local nonprofits are particularly concerned about maintaining the water quality. So preventing trash, preventing erosion, and recreational activity like a creek or, a more formal way of engaging with the creek channel might be an invitation to the blues for litter and trash and other impacts to water quality that our regulatory friends would probably feel badly about.
I think that makes a good point right there. Anyone else have a question or a follow-up question, or do you have further questions, Mr. Barnes?
Well, I do, but I'll wait till after we do public comment. Thank you.
All right. For some reason, I thought I had done public comment, but I guess I haven't. So at this point, we encourage anyone who is still watching at this hour to look to the Zoom icon, the Zoom control panel, and look for the raised hand icon to indicate that you would like to speak. Or if you are attending by telephone, you can press *9, and that will indicate to staff that you would like to speak on the subject. You are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes on the subject of this study session for the Pope Chaucer Bridge replacement. Mr. Tapia, do we have any interest?
Yes, we do, Chair Riggs. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the speakers as they came in. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first speaker. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but if you can also please state your first and last name. So Tom Cabot, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. You should be able to activate your microphone.
Yes, thank you. This is Tom Cabot, a Menlo Park resident of the Willows. Thanks for the presentation. I had one request and a question. The request would be that by the year 2024, I think there will be a lot more clean electric construction equipment available, and all this creek work will be in close proximity to the neighborhoods. And so one way to reduce soot would be to electrify as much of the construction activity as possible. So perhaps folks can look into planning for that. That was the request. The question is, I'm a little concerned about having a second stop sign on the bridge over the creek at Pope and Chaucer. And I'm wondering, is there a way to decrease the arch so that a stop sign is not, a second stop sign is not needed? And what would that decreasing of the arch entail?
May I respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, two great suggestions. As far as clean electric construction equipment goes, we can certainly include a request for that when we consider our construction options for the bridge, and ask our contractors to consider utilizing cleaner equipment. I am all in favor of cleaner equipment. It's for many reasons. So thank you for that suggestion. The two stop signs regarding the arch in the bridge, the deck of the bridge, actually the height of the bridge, needs to accommodate the flow that we anticipate under the bridge. So the height of the bridge was specifically designed for that in mind. For further details about that, I want to toss this back to Kevin Murray.
Yes, thanks. So originally, there was no need for that stop sign because we had raised the bridge to a height where when you kind of approach the bridge, we found that we had to elevate the intersections and elevate the streets such that our grade was gentle enough that one could drive over it without experiencing, a sudden change in angle of your vehicle. That resulted in a lot of imported earth, a lot of fill, and the neighbors adjacent on all four corners of the bridge would end up having retaining walls in their front yard to kind of keep this soil that's been imported to elevate the street in place. And it was a very large footprint. It was very unpopular with the neighbors, as you can imagine. And so in order to maintain the amount of flow that we were targeting and not have to raise all the streets around the bridge, we decided to go with a little bit steeper arc. It still got us the elevation we needed, but it meant that as you approach it, particularly from Chaucer Street in Palo Alto, if you were to enter the bridge at an unsafe speed, as you kind of went from flat ground to suddenly, you hit almost a ramp up to get onto the bridge, it might create an unsafe situation. By adding the fourth stop sign at that intersection, it creates, the need for motors to come to a full or at least close to full stop and then begin again, at which point, their speed would be well under control and wouldn't cause any potential safety hazards.
Mr. Cabot, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Murray, I have a follow-up. The 3-foot rise over something around 100 feet is not what I would call a dramatic rise. We have railroad crossings in 4 different locations in our town, a couple of locations in Atherton, ample locations in our adjacent cities. The Watkins Avenue crossing in between Menlo Park and Atherton, and the crossing of Atherton Avenue are both without stop signs and have adjacent streets to the tracks. The Watkins has, I believe, at least a 3-foot lift in less than 100 feet. I am not aware of frequent reports of cars launching themselves over the rise. Is this a case of let's do belt and suspenders just to make sure we don't have to answer any questions? Are the double stop signs actually that necessary? If you come to one stop sign, are you going to attain such a speed in the next 100 feet that you are dangerous, particularly since you're faced with a bridge? It's rather hard to miss a 3-foot elevation, particularly in an environment full of speed bumps. Should I stop there?
Sure, I certainly understand the point of your question. I think I'll start my response by saying that currently there is a 4-way stop in Menlo Park at the intersection of Pope and Woodland Avenue. So this recommendation would not change anything on the Menlo Park side. And currently there's a 3-way stop in Palo Alto at the intersection of Chaucer and Palo Alto Avenue. What we're really recommending is that there be a 4th stop added where there currently is no stop, and that is traveling north on Chaucer from Palo Alto, entering into Menlo Park. And that's the area where there's this potential for a quickly traveling vehicle to engage in this kind of quick, you say not so quick, but the traffic engineer from our bridge designer believes that it's a quick enough transition that the stop sign is recommended. Whether or not it's required, I can't answer that at this time. I think it's just a recommendation from our designer for traffic safety.
Would you be willing to keep that open for neighborhood discussion?
Well, I mean, I think it's always open for discussion. Ultimately, the cities would have to, I believe, make a decision if they want to, go away from the designer's recommendation. I guess I don't know that there's a specific variance or anything that can be issued, but it would be up to the cities to decide if the importance of not adding another stop sign outweighed the importance of the traffic safety recommendation of the designer. But certainly we're not locked into this as a decision. It's a recommendation at this point.
All right, thank you. I've sort of interrupted the flow of people asking questions. So Mr. Tapia, I see we have a couple more raised hands.
Yes, that is correct, Chair Riggs. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker. Jim Wiley, if you can please also introduce your first and last name and also your political jurisdiction or organizational affiliation.
Hi, I'm Jim Wiley from Menlo Park on Woodland Avenue, downstream from the Pope Chaucer Bridge. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I've got 2 points to talk about. The first one, I sent an email to the planning commissioners about an hour before the meeting, where I want to focus on the fact that I did a poll using Nextdoor, and about 2/3 of the Willows residents supported keeping the Pope Saucer Bridge open during the construction by staging construction over 2 summers, as opposed to as the JPA originally proposed 4 or 5 years ago. The JPA now proposes to close the bridge completely for 1 9-month construction period. You know, in the Netherlands, they can replace a overcrossing on a weekend in 2 days. 9 months is a long time to have the Pope Saucer Bridge closed. As traffic returns to pre-COVID levels, I estimate that closing the bridge will increase travel times from Palo Alto to the Willows and Vintage Oaks by about 10 to 15 minutes if you're using Middlefield, or about 20 to 40 minutes if you're using University Avenue during the evening commute. Please don't allow the complete 9-month closure plan to proceed. The original 2-summer plan probably costs a little bit more, but will impact the lives of Menlo Park residents much, much less. Second point I want to make is that the bridge now passes 90% of the water it needs to pass, and the bridge that is being proposed passes way, way more than that. So I don't see any reason why there's a 3-foot rise. The bridge should be minimized until it only passes what's necessary. And this is an over-designed bridge. It's a super bridge. It has 11 times the cross-sectional capacity of what's there now, according to my analysis. The comments about being 10 to 15 minutes longer by Middlefield or 20 to 40 minutes longer by University are based on data collected during evening commutes when University Avenue is clogged.
30 seconds.
Okay, and when Middlefield is clogged during the evening commute. These data are available and are not reflected in any analysis by the JPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. And why don't we come back to these, a couple of these questions after we hear from the next speaker.
Okay, at this time, I will go ahead and introduce Brielle Jonk. Again, if you can please state your first and last name and political jurisdiction.
Hi, this is Steve Schmidt. Brielle is my manager of technology. So I'm speaking on my behalf and not for her. There was in the presentation, there is another story, and that is about, as you might expect, Stanford University and its control of or ownership of sites upstream that are potentially going to be used for upstream detention. At the time the EIR was drafted and then finalized, Stanford was refusing to allow the JPA staff on its property to investigate the feasibility of these upstream sites. But the final EIR was approved anyway. And I'm concerned that this project is over-designed because those upstream sites and their potential to hold water out of the stream flow were not considered in these designs. So I think if you're interested in doing something to help the outcome of this project, you would recommend requiring signed agreements between Stanford and the JPA for the use of these sites for upstream detention. And I think you would find that the bridge would not need to be as high. The channelization of the creek would not need to be so extensive, and the loss of trees on both sides of the creek would be much less than what is being proposed right now. I would also suggest that you require the JPA to mark every tree that they plan on removing because of this project. I think the best guarantee of a project that's acceptable to the community is transparency. And what you saw in the slideshow is probably a pretty soft rendition of what is actually going to happen when this project goes ahead. But again, I think you should require an agreement between Stanford and the JPA about the use of those upstream detention sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. And Mr. Tapia, do we have any other speakers waiting?
Yes, we do, Chair Riggs. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker. So give me 1 second. So speaker named Judy. If you could just please introduce your first and last name, the political jurisdiction in which you live in. Your microphone should be active now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, commissioners. My name is Judy Rocchio. I live in the Willows neighborhood. I've lived here for 28 years. So I want to just say I agree with what Steve Schmidt just said 100%. I'm very concerned that this is an over-designed bridge because we do not actually know what the target flow will be. We have designed it in assumption that we will need to have much more stream flow than we may need. So here's my thing. I feel like the EIR has changed so much just with what we were seeing today and over time. And I also agree that it did not include the diversion information that it should have. So I believe the EIR is no longer valid. I believe that this
Judy
project.
Rocchio.
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Please continue with your discussion.
Okay, why did somebody say my name?
I apologize. That might be from someone outside the hearing, but
Okay.
if you please
Okay.
continue.
Okay, fine. So basically, I'm kind of arguing that it would be nice if we got a EIR that actually reflected the project as it will be initiated. Currently, the EIR is completely outdated. It's resulted in the development of a much bigger bridge than is needed if we can divert water. And I think it would open up an opportunity for a lot more public involvement that would actually go towards doing things like providing suggestions on how to maintain more trees, on how to design it so that it's better for all habitat involved, including humans. So I know I just feel like the final EIR was signed during a time of COVID that a lot of people didn't get to review it and respond. So I think it would be really helpful if we could just do a supplemental EIR that gives us more details about what's really going to happen and what's really needed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rocchio. And do we have any other speakers?
At this time, Chair Riggs, I am not seeing any additional commenters.
All right, as we've been available for at least 12 minutes, and the hour is late, I am going to close public comment. We have a couple of open questions that I think I'd like to follow up on. One having to do with the staging of construction, which may involve verifying that this is actually 9 months worth of on-site construction. Secondly, whether the rather significant difference between the cross-section of the new bridge from the existing is rather like adding another stop sign, just built-in suspenders. So apologies if this is challenging good engineering, but the questions have been raised. And Ms. Bruce, would this be your response?
Yes, I can begin the response. I think Kevin will probably need to chime in and supplement my response. So with regard to the bridge design for, and if you could, Chair Riggs, if you wouldn't mind restating your first question, just to refresh my memory.
No, of course. The first was whether the construction could be done over 2 summers, and the verification that 9 months is actually the necessary construction term.
Thank you. As I understand it, from speaking with our construction engineering consulting firm and our partners at Valley Water, it is both the demolition of the existing bridge structure and the construction of the new bridge that take that time. We are discouraged from in-channel construction work by our regulatory agencies, notably among them, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So an expeditious, although it sounds less expeditious by, making it a 9-month project instead of breaking it over two summers, but having all of the work concentrated at one time, at least from the regulatory agencies and from an engineering and safety standpoint, is, in our opinion, the best course of action. I would love to have Kevin chime in here and add anything additional about the engineering prospects, safety, or regulatory impacts.
So a couple of things I'd like to comment on. The existing bridge, it just by a simple division will convey about 77% of the target flow. So it is definitely a bigger constriction than some might believe. And so there's no real way to just kind of chip away at the undersized of the culvert, for example, and add a little bit more flow. It really requires a replacement. And speaking on the prospect of keeping the bridge open during construction, originally we had proposed to do so, but in order to do so, we're going to have to use the area over the culvert that is currently not used for roadway. It's on the downstream side of the roadway. It's where all the fill is, as a temporary bypass for vehicle traffic. Remove half of the bridge, half of the existing bridge, build a new bridge, then remove the other half where the temporary bypass was. And we found there's some traffic safety concerns with that as far as lines of sight, but more importantly, and which draw a much bigger response from the community, is it will require the removal of several mature and protected trees along that area. By doing the demo all at once, we were able to avoid basically having to put a temporary road through a wooded area that would have required removing more trees. So that was really the point that helped us make that decision. It also allowed then for us to reduce to 1 year of construction, which is much more favorable for regulatory agencies as part of it.
All right, I appreciate that. Although to the second question, while the bridge clearly needs to be replaced and the culvert rebuilt, do you need the 3-foot additional rise based on a need for an additional, whatever it is, 35% cross-sectional area, where you potentially are creating many times more cross-sectional area?
Yes. We do need that additional rise in the deck to convey the flow that we want to convey. If it were just a straight across the channel, we would not have the required safety measure of clearance to convey the target flow.
All right, so it's not just a cross-sectional area, it's actually a elevation above sea level that you're concerned about.
It's not an elevation above sea level. It's an additional elevation, again, above the anticipated water surface elevation to accommodate for things like a down tree that might get dammed into the the, the passage under the bridge. If it were to come up and hit the soffit, even if it doesn't completely block it, the additional deck height gives us an additional area of safety such that more water could pass more easily.
Okay, thank you. And then speaking of the potential of something coming down to block downstream, your illustrations include the planting of trees in the riverbed or the stream bed. So as these trees get bigger and bigger, is there a point during their growth when they are a bit larger than mere branches and twigs, but not strong enough to withstand floodwaters? I'm wondering what happens to all this vegetation in a 1998 style flood.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Typically, mature trees from the top of the bank are the most vulnerable during large flows, because if the bank is eroded underneath them, they can become undermined, and then they fall into the creek, root wad and all. And a lot of times those are non-native trees. The types of trees and bushes we would be planting are species that are very well adapted to live in that creek and riverine environment. Certainly at the toe of the bank and the kind of midsection of the bank, we'd be largely installing arroyo willow, which is a species that is very well designed for large flows. It doesn't get very tall and bulky. It's a bushy type of tree. When big flows come, it's very adept at just kind of laying down during the big event. And after the waters recede, it'll kind of pop back up. It has a very robust root structure that's well adapted to living in that environment. And then all of the top of bank trees we would be planting would be primarily things like bay laurels, which are, again, very well adapted to living on that top of bank, mid-bank area that have extensive root structure. So not only do we would anticipate that they aren't very likely to present a danger in the future, they actually act to stabilize those banks and provide for a very kind of, once they're mature, a very stable and regular channel formation.
All right, thank you. Any other questions regarding this project at this time, Mr. Barnes?
Question and a comment. First, I'm sorry, question and a comment, and then finally, Commissioner Riggs, is the result of this study session not to come up with, as a study session doesn't, any recommendation or any determination or any vote? It's just going to end on commentary. Is that correct?
It is my understanding that this is a gathering of comments from the Planning Commission. And I can check in with Mr. Sartor if there's anything additional that's required of us tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Riggs. This is intended to be an opportunity for you as the commission to hear comments from the public and yourselves on the proposed project. The project will be brought to the Menlo Park City Council at a future date to actually review the details of the bridge design and in particular any issues about funding for the project in the future. Date to be determined. So at this point, we're just looking for public comments and your comments on the project. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Two areas. One is, as it relates to the bridge and the bridge design, this is a question for Ms. Bruce. And can you confirm what I often hear, which is that it's not necessarily, it's not only the flow through or throughput of Chaucer Bridge, which is problematic, but it is a stacking of debris at the mouth of the bridge, which becomes quite problematic in the event of a storm. And it not only are you constricted with, in best of circumstances, throughput, but also that constriction creates a real problem, and has in the past. Was that what was happening?
Yes, that is true. That there can be debris that can pile up there, which can further restrict or constrict that opening.
Thank you.
I'd like
Kevin,
to
yeah, if you would.
Yeah, I'd like to supplement that response. That's usually, we find that to be more of a problem down at the east or west Bay Shore Road Bridge, where there's kind of the Caltrans has installed some pier walls underneath, and you saw a picture of it earlier. At the Pope Chaucer Bridge, certainly if there were to be a debris jam, it could, particularly of one large tree with a large canopy, it could be very problematic. But in 1998, during the flood of record, all of the debris that entered the area was kind of suspended over the culvert because the culvert was completely submerged in water. The culvert was experiencing pressure flow, which means all the weight of the water and debris above it were forcing water through. And it just was not enough hydraulic capacity in that culvert. So there was no tree, we believe, that caused the 1998 flood. It was just way too much water for that culvert to handle.
Okay, thank you. As it relates to the bridge design, money aside, because there's always the economic piece of it, but in terms of design, I don't know why we wouldn't. I am much more in favor of design which future-proofs the area from flooding in the future, whether it is from the debris or whether it is from climatic changes, which are going to potentially add more water in a shorter period of time. I think, would be foolish to redo the Chaucer Bridge, which was underbuilt clearly for what it needs to be doing today. And I think we'd be remiss to duplicate that, lack of building out a bridge which is future-proof to handle flows which may come in the future, which we may not be anticipating. So I have no problem with the design, and I'm going to defer to the experts in terms of what's appropriate. And then from an aesthetic perspective, it works fine. So I think it works from an infrastructure perspective, and certainly it works from an aesthetic perspective. The other question I wanted to ask is, as it relates to the slide that we saw earlier, traffic and transportation, and in that, it would, if someone would be so kind as to pull that slide up, and specifically on the slide, it was showing 2 red dots at Woodland and Middlefield. And I wanted to get a little more information about that particular area, because it was denoted as being one of the most, will be, should the project go forward, one of the most acutely impacted areas. Is someone able to pull that slide from the deck up?
Unfortunately, I can't run the slides, but while we're waiting for that, I think Kevin can probably speak to that. Kevin, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. We did a traffic impact study for the bridge replacement, both with temporary vehicular access and with the bridge closure. And what we found, looks like it's coming up.
There we go. And I think I can do the screen. It's not letting me.
Okay, maybe that's okay. There were noticeable impacts at all the intersections around the area, but our analysis indicated that motorists traveling south on Pope who would not be able to cross the Pope Chaucer Bridge would make a right-hand turn onto Woodland Avenue. There you go. So you can see Pope Street where the 4 circles are. Would make a right-hand turn onto Woodland Avenue in order to cross the creek at Middlefield Road. Now, the traffic impacts themselves, the additional number of vehicles wasn't enough such that there was major concern. The traffic engineers that did the analysis noted that these particular intersections, in particular Woodland and Middlefield, is a very bad intersection. It's a difficult unprotected left-hand turn, and vehicles tend to travel pretty fast on Middlefield. And so the recommendation is that with these additional vehicles, coupled with the fact that this is a very poorly designed intersection, they recommended a temporary traffic signal to kind of usher those additional vehicles through the area.
Thank you for that. And I live close to that, and that intersection in the best of days is hugely problematic. So I want to, one, say very much in support of a signalized intersection there. Two, the concept of that signalized intersection in the interplay between Woodland and Middlefield, and then going into Baywood, that whole area there, there's specific parts of the transportation master plan which was developed for Menlo Park, which talks to this specific area. So there is work product which exists, which also has the installation of a signalized intersection right at this area explicitly for traffic management. So to the extent that you want to look at work product that the city has already created, it already exists for that area right there. Not obviously in anticipation of this, but just as ongoing potential mitigation. And it's in the TMP as a future project for the city. So there is some work product available to look at as you go through and study what you might do there. So those are my two comments. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments? And I think we're down to 5 commissioners at this point. If everyone's had a chance to weigh in.
Commissioner Riggs?
Yes, Mr. DeCardi.
Thank you. I want to pick up on the public comment nicely, Commissioner Riggs, several of the key points. I thought there were 3 others that I would like to hear responses to. One was the question about the upstream retention ponds and not knowing the total flow rate needed over time. And I think that relates to the phasing, which is you're going to explore retention ponds, but after this phase of the project. So perhaps address that question. The second one was the comment by one of the speakers about the EIR being outdated. Wanted to give you a chance to respond to that. And then the third one was around the importance of public engagement and understanding and transparency. And I thought perhaps you could give a fuller explanation of what type of public engagement will be happening from here forward. I would also note that I participated in one of your previous online sessions going over this and appreciated you taking that time. So those 3 questions from our public comments, and then I have 2 short points to make after that.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner DeCardi. So regarding upstream detention, let me just give a very quick update, and then I'll ask Kevin to chime in on some of the more technical matters. One of the public commenters was speculating about or was wondering about the relationship we had with Stanford University and whether or not we would be perhaps excluded from or ever included in a potential study. We do have a signed agreement with Stanford University to access their property to do a feasibility evaluation of those potential detention basins. That has just begun. We are starting to do that work that explores where the locations could be, the sizes of the basins, the kind of geological or geographic location and structure that are possible, the potentials for off-stream storage. And it looks like we're maybe hypothetically capable of detaining upwards of 1,000 cubic feet per second, which in a perfect world, together with the hypothetical detention capacity of the Searsville restoration project at Stanford, might get us to the protection required for what's called the 100-year flood protection. The current Reach 2 projects, the bridge replacements and the channel widening gets us to the 70-year flood of record level, not the 100-year flood protection that's so important to get our downstream community members out of the FEMA floodplain. As we're doing those upstream detention basin evaluations, and again, they're just getting started, we don't have any guarantee that they are actually going to be technically feasible. So we have to go through that evaluation process. We will learn more in the course of time. It's probably going to take us another 9 months or so of geotechnical, cultural resource impacts, biotic, vegetation, and just plain and simple hydraulic engineering analysis to figure out if those things are possible. So we are looking at it. It's not a guarantee. The bridge elevation, as one of your commissioner colleagues so well put it, is future proofing. It's sufficient to pass the flow that we anticipate, even if we are not able, even after evaluation and working with Stanford, even if we're not able to get upstream detention. Kevin, do you have any other technical input?
I do want to make one important distinction, and that is when Margaret says that the upstream detention has the potential to provide 100-year protection. What that is considering the additive value to the bridge replacement and channel widening that we're contemplating now. 100-year protection is our ultimate goal. That's our target for the level of flood protection to provide to the community. There's no upstream detention possible that gets us by itself to 100. Just the topography of the hills up there doesn't provide enough detention capacity. So what we're looking at is we built the downstream project to the 100-year flow. We're building these middle reach improvements to about the 70-year flow, which is about equal to the flood of record and resonates in people's minds. And if that's the best we can do, most of the community feels like that's a very high level of flood protection. However, if we do find that there's a feasible opportunity upstream, there's a possibility that we could take that 70-year protection and supplement it with detention to get to the full 100-year protection. So we need to rebuild the bridge and do the channel widening projects anyways. It's just a matter of, do we have another opportunity to make the project even better in the future?
All right, thank you.
And with regard to the comment or question about an outdated EIR, Kevin, I think you're probably the most knowledgeable speaker on that point as well. I know the certification happened actually pre-COVID, but what constitutes an outdated EIR in this case, I'm not sure.
I believe the speaker was making the point that the upstream detention might have an opportunity to alter the design flow of the bridge, and that's not the case. The design flow of the bridge is the best we can make it without adding flood walls or excavating large areas around the bridge. There's not really a project alternative that reduces the scale of the bridge flow capacity because of upstream detention. So I don't believe the EIR is out of date or insufficient. I think that it's exactly the EIR we need. And if we were to do supplemental upstream detention in the future, we would either have to do a brand new EIR or a very robust supplemental to our programmatic EIR.
How about the public engagement question?
So the EIR had a number of public engagement outreach events associated with the EIR, but specific to outreach for the project as it progresses. We did those 2 webinar-based, Zoom-based public engagement project update events that hopefully provided some members of the community an update on where we are with this, the evolution of our project designs, our specific plans for channel widening, tree protection, the bridge design, et cetera. These projects don't move at a breakneck pace. So I would like to do project updates for the community about every 6 months. We'll probably have enough new information to make it interesting, worthwhile, and timely. So look for another set of public engagement updates similar to the ones that we put on at late February, early March, again this winter.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder that you are still in design.
Yes, we are very much. As I mentioned, our channel widening work is somewhere between 30 and 50% complete. So we are still refining those details.
That's great. Thank you.
Riggs, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to add for the EIR conversation. The EIR was a series of public meetings were held for scoping including a public meeting at Laurel Elementary School in the spring of 2019, where comments were taken and passed on into the ERR itself. Just thought you might want to be aware of that.
I suspected so. Thank you.
And then just my brief comments, since part of this is for commissioner comment on this. In general, from just the basic design and what it looks like and improvement for the community and all those pieces, I think it looks really nice, and would be an improvement. The downsides, I think, are three things. One is the trees, and everything you can do to mitigate on the trees. And I think, you're talking about that already, but that's a concern for the community. I think the emphasis on the replacement with natives and with species that are better situated for this environment, and broadly, and then more explicitly the environment in the creek discussed, is a big advantage. And taking out older, more mature invasive species and replacing with natives can be helpful in that mix. But I think that's going to be a big and ongoing conversation that you're going to have with the community. The second thing is the hassles of construction and the mitigation around that. And I completely agree with the good point Commissioner Barnes raised. There has been a look at a transportation master plan for the community to the extent that this can be hooked up, and that some stuff that you might do temporarily actually should be aligned with permanent work that was already envisioned. I sure hope that you all in the city have that conversation to mitigate the impact of essentially taking two whacks at the same intersection for the community. And then the third one is on the public engagement piece on this. I think more and more, people expect in their lives to be able to engage at the moment they're paying attention to something. That's how it works on everything else. I can click over and buy something on Amazon. And so to the fact that there was some engagement by some on the EIR, which will feel like an eternity ago, is not going to be satisfactory to members of the community who are going to be zeroing in on this as it gets closer. And I think the pandemic has also raised a problem about equitable engagement. People have a very difficult time, many people, in being able, for all sorts of reasons, to participate in this remote environment. Or there are unfortunate glitches, like with, transposing numbers on an invite for a video link that can preclude participation. And so I'm encouraged that you're thinking about participation with many, many more opportunities going forward, especially when it can be in person. You can get that feedback in different ways. Would echo that transparency point, I think, being very important to get the broad community buy-in as this moves forward. And really just thank you, and echo Commissioner Kennedy's point about the excellent presentation and the care that you're taking on this project, and look forward to seeing it progress.
Thank you so much for your comments. I'm taking notes. Appreciate it.
And do we have perhaps a last comment from anyone? All right, well, the hour is late, but I think we've given a good range of response. I'm going to be so bold as to suggest that given that this bridge most admirably reduces the footprint of the crossing, that perhaps it's not out of scale for the budget of this project to have an Army Corps of Engineers style temporary bridge that is possibly located to the east for 3 months and then located to the west for 4 months. But I'll just leave that as it would be nice if that could be considered. But I also recognize that the measured traffic flow may simply not justify it. And so I will add my appreciation. The community had to wait about 2 decades for this actually to start moving forward. But now that it is, certainly the presentation tonight indicates it's going to be ultimately quite a positive for Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And who knows, I may still be volunteering when that is finally realized, though I don't think so. So I think that concludes our study session, with appreciation for your team in staying this late. And with that, we'll close the study session and move on to our informational items. So Ms. Sandemeyer, do you have an update on the upcoming meetings? I know I've got my fingers crossed about at least one of them.
Yes, good evening again. So April 26th, that's the next meeting. We have 111 Independence Drive, and that will be going forward for the entitlements and the final environmental impact report. And that concludes my updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Sandemeyer tonight? All right, I'm thinking not. In that case, this meeting is adjourned at 10:45 p.m. Thank you to all for staying this late. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chair Riggs. Thank you, staff.
Good night.